What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories. 3 Saw Chapter 51 The Fang Pirates and Advertisement. The East China Sea, an unknown sea area. A warship flying the seagull flag was sailing. On the wide plywood, Karen's figure was straight and tall, wearing a cape that symbolized the justice of the marine captain, looking at the sea in a daze. More than 20 days have passed since Karen went to sea. Before this issue, Karen would occasionally kill some less powerful Poseidons to replenish food. Occasionally, he would cook some meals by himself, but after what happened last time, Guillaume took him to his room and ate them secretly, causing Karen to scream in disappointment. Guillaume sometimes serves as Karen's sparring partner to consolidate Karen's armed hockey. In addition to training in hockey, he also learns a lot of navigator knowledge from Guillaume. As the commander of a warship, he does not need the knowledge of a Grandmaster Navigator, but he still needs to have a rough understanding of some superficial aspects. In this sea, in addition to pirates and Poseidons, the climate also brings great dangers. Karen is like a sponge, soaking up knowledge about the sea. We also met a few unsighted pirate groups in the process, but with Karen's strength plus Guillaume, as long as they were not big pirates from the New World, they were no threat to Karen, so they were easily dealt with by Karen, captured. They were all locked in a cell below the cabin at this time. Since there were no well-known big pirates and no devil fruit users were encountered, there was no need to bring them back to Marine Fendo. All they had to do was go to the island where Marine was stationed and take them there. Just deliver it in exchange for military merit. Oh, in just over 20 days, I met so many pirates on the sea. Is this the era of great pirates? Karen stood on the plywood smoking a cigarette and couldn't help feeling a little emotional. Guillaume was lying leisurely on the beach chair next to her, leaning back slightly and crossing her legs. Her little feet were swaying gently. They were white and delicate, as if they could reveal a faint luster. Hearing Karen's emotion, she opened her eyes, glanced at Karen, and said calmly, "This is still just the 4 seas. When it comes to the New World, there are as many pirates as there are carp crossing the river. Even we, Marine, can't clean them up. Most of the islands in the New World are occupied by pirates. The most powerful pirates are even called emperors of the sea. It's ridiculous. Pirates can even become emperors." Karen's mind moved and asked, "Who are the emperors in the New World now?" Advertisement. Guillaume stood up, walked to Karen, looked at the sea, and said slowly, "After One Piece Roger's death, the strongest ones were the Whitebeard pirates. Then there were the Big Mom pirates and the Emerging Beasts pirates. They were called the 3 emperors, and there was supposed to be another one named Jin. Lion pirates also have this qualification. The 3 emperors? It seems that the red-haired pirates have not yet become famous at this time." Karen asked casually, "Where is the Golden Lion?" He remembered that the Golden Lion was the one who single-handedly entered the Marine headquarters, Marinvandor, after Roger's death. After being defeated, he was taken to the 6th floor of the world's largest great prison, Impulse City. 2 years later, he cut off his feet that were bound by sea tower stone shackles, escaped from Propulsion City, and became the first prisoner in Propulsion City to successfully escape from prison. It is now the year 1503 of the Hainan calendar, and Roger was executed in 1498, which means that 3 years have passed since Shiki refused to escape from prison. When Guillaume mentioned the Golden Lion, he seemed to recall the scene of the Golden Lion making a big fuss about Marine Fendo. He fell into memories and said with some uncertainty, "After Golden Lion escaped from prison, he did not appear in the New World. He must be afraid of Marine." Karen smiled and said nothing. He knew that the Golden Lion had not given up his revenge plan, but was holding back on an island called Vilmeo. "Maybe when I get stronger, I can catch him myself. After all, in the plot, the Golden Lion is not particularly powerful." "Colonel." A rushing voice came from the observation tower. 2 pirate ships were seen exchanging fire ahead. Karen put out the cigarette in his hand, stretched, smiled, and asked with interest, "Can you tell what kind of pirate group it is?" After a while, a Marine ran down from the observation deck. He gave Karen a military salute with respect and excitement in his eyes. In these short 20 days, Karen's strength had already convinced them. One of the songs is about the Fang Pirates who came back from the Grand Line. Their captain is called Kingsley Angus. He is a devil fruit user with canine fruit and hyena form. His bounty is 56 million. Another pirate group is blocked by the Fang Pirates ship. The flag cannot be seen clearly, but it can be blocked. Their ship is not big. They should be a small pirate group from the East China Sea. "Oh, a devil fruit user?" Advertisement. Karen looked a little excited. Since he went to sea, he had never met a pirate group who had eaten a devil fruit. His seafloor stone cell was still empty. "Haha, good, let's move the boat over." Guillaume stretched, turned his head, and asked, "Do you want my help?" "No, it's only 56 million. I can handle it myself." Karen rejected Guillaume's proposal. After all, he couldn't be cruel as a sparring partner with Guillaume. Finally, he met a decent-looking opponent, so he wanted to do it himself. Don't judge the strength of a pirate group based on the bounty. Just like the Blade Pirates you met last time. Although the bounty is very high, that's because they often slaughter islands. Guillaume rolled his eyes. Even though he said this, he did not stop Karen and lay down on the lounge chair again. I understand, thank you. Karen solemnly thanked him. He had indeed made such a mistake and judged the strength of the pirate group by looking at the bounty. Guillaume closed his eyes and said casually, but this is the world, and there is no pirate group worthy of my action. You should be careful. The entire army is on alert and ready to board the ship. Coming to the bow of the ship, Karen ordered, Yes, Colonel. The soldiers standing behind Karen all looked excited. These days, they had seen too many pirates who knew nothing about the world being suppressed by Karen's thunder. Karen took the telescope from Jess's hand and looked at the two pirate groups that were fighting. The larger pirate group on one side has a pirate flag with fangs on it. I think it must be the Fang Pirates. As for the other group, it is obscured by the big ship and cannot see the flag clearly, so it is impossible to tell who it is. What pirate group? As the warship continued to approach, Karen's spirit was shaken, and he finally saw the flag of the other side clearly. There is a white skull with two steel knives on its back. A touch of red extends diagonally downward from above the skull's left eye. The Red-Haired Pirates, Chapter 52 Poisoning Advertisement. Seeing this familiar flag, Karen was horrified. Is this a little pirate group from the East China Sea? Immediately, an uncontrollable excitement suddenly emerged in his heart. This was the Red-Haired Pirate Group, the future Four Emperors Pirate Group, and he unexpectedly met him like this. As a popular pirate group in the plot, Shanks can be said to be the starting point of the comic One Piece. Just imagine, how would the story have happened if Luffy had not met Shanks? Shanks didn't blame Luffy. Is Luffy still the protagonist? You know, Shanks hasn't met Luffy yet, and if he can catch Shanks here. This is not impossible. As we all know, the red-haired pirates don't have devil fruit abilities, so his 100% ability to be caught with bare hands is completely usable. Thinking of this, his heart was burning. Immediately, he gradually calmed down. Although he could control Shanks, the other people on his ship should not be underestimated. He just didn't know who the red-haired pirates were now. Is there Ben Beckman, the future gun-toting Kizaru? Karen glanced at Guillaume, who was sitting on the deck chair, feeling a little hesitant. No, there are only Guillaume and I on the warship, and there are too few high-end combat forces. It is impossible to arrest Shanks based on the strength here. The moment Karen looked at Guillaume, she suddenly stood up from the recliner, and then a Shunpo came to Karen and said solemnly. Something's wrong. There are at least 7 or 8 masters ahead. It seems that her sense of perception has touched Shanks and the others. Well, there is a team ahead of us, the red-haired pirates. Karen handed the telescope to Guillaume and said in a deep voice. Guillaume took a look at the telescope and said slowly. Shanks of the red-haired pirate group was once a member of Roger's pirate group. In the years after Roger's death, he formed his own pirate group. His style of conduct was relatively low-key and he did not commit any bad acts of massacre of civilians. The current bounty is as high as 200 million. He has many masters on board. Just the two of us are probably no match for them. I don't know why they appeared in the East China Sea. Please contact the headquarters first and see what the headquarters says. After just one look, Guillaume made his own judgment, advertisement. Looking at Karen, who was eager to try, Guillaume advised. And for some reason, the world government's attitude towards the red-haired pirates is very strange. They're dog-eating dog now, and there is no need for us to get involved. Karen grasped the key point and asked, weird attitude? When Guillaume said this, he was also a little confused and explained. Yes, it stands to reason that the red-haired man is the remnant of the Roger pirates. Even if he did not commit the massacre of civilians, the world government would not leave any room to encircle and suppress him. You must know that after Roger died, so in Roger all the people involved have been punished, but the world government doesn't pay much attention to him. Karen's mind was moved, and she thought of the speculation about Shanks' life experience in her previous life. Shanks was probably a descendant of the celestial dragons. Even if he was not a celestial dragon, he still had a lot of connections with the celestial dragons. He could even make Marine give him face. The king of face, Shanks, is not just talk. Meanwhile on the other side, the sound of artillery was as deafening as thunder, and the clash of weapons echoed through the sky, one after another, intertwining into a chaotic and fierce battle movement. The thick smell of gunpowder filled the air, like a heavy layer of fog, making people feel suffocated and nervous. A man wearing a straw hat raised his weapon high and shouted excitedly. They were actually targeted by hyenas. Ha ha ha, just in time to snatch their treasure. The speaker is none other than the future Four Emperors Shanks. And food. A fat man added, taking a bite of a piece of meat larger than his face. Beckman on the side lit a cigarette and said with a smile. Of course, Lucky Lou, since we came to the East China Sea, we haven't encountered such a large pirate group for a long time. Moreover, a cold light flashed in Beckman's eyes. They're actively attacking my pirate group. Gia Lulu, what kind of pirate group is worth 200 million? It's just a pirate group that got along with Roger's name. It's a rubbish pirate group that has never even been to the Grand Line. It's just a name. On the bow of the Fang pirate ship, Kingsley Angus held a sharp knife with a crazy grin on his face. Advertisement. One Piece the remnants on Roger's ship. If we kill them, I will definitely become famous all over the world. Gia Lulu. I didn't expect to meet such a good thing just after looting an island. Lousy is indeed a person blessed by the sea. Hearing what his captain said, the boys beside him couldn't help but echoed. That's right, the captain is a user with the ability of the hyena fruit, which is beyond the reach of a trash pirate like him who is in vain. Yes, under the leadership of the great Captain Angus, we are a pirate group that has even been to the Grand Line. Oh ho ho ho, long live the boss. Kingsley Angus enjoyed his younger brother's praise very much. He pressed his palms and laughed at Shanks. Pirates are not just a family game. I'm afraid you haven't even killed anyone. Lousy just looted an island. Really? Shanks lowered his head and couldn't see the expression on his face clearly. This move made Kingsley Angus even more arrogant. He smiled evilly and said, "The bounty for a trash pirate who was just a trainee crew member at One Piece is even higher than that of Lousy." As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and said with a smile, "Well, don't say that I won't give you a chance. How about becoming a trainee crew member under me?" Oh ho ho ho. One Piece's intern comes to our pirate group to intern. Does that mean that the captain is also One Piece? A younger brother standing next to Kingsley Angus yelled excitedly, completely unaware of Shanks' face that gradually raised with a hint of chill. A terrifying coercion began to spread from Shanks' body. It was Shanks' anger and his conqueror's domination. This is Shanks. You can insult him, but you can't insult his friend, his captain. Dong. Dong dong. The crew members of the Fang Pirates began to fall down one by one, foaming at the mouth, except for Kingsley Angus, who looked shocked, and the younger brother who was yelling just now. What's going on? Hey, what's going on with you? Kingsley Angus looked panicked, his legs were shaking constantly, and the little brother standing next to him was even more unbearable. He was incontinent and slumped on the spot. When? You actually poisoned us? Chapter 53. Pull the ship over. Advertisement. Kingsley Angus, who had only been to the first half of the Grand Line, had no idea that there was such a power as domineering in this world. Through his own experience, he came to the conclusion that someone had poisoned his men. Feeling his condition carefully, he found that there was no sign of poisoning. He gradually calmed down from the panic and said viciously, "I underestimated you. I didn't expect you to be so despicable. But, Gialulu, you seem to have forgotten me." Shanks smiled when he heard this and retorted, "You were wrong. I did not forget you. On the contrary, I kept you here on purpose." "Leave me here. Ha ha ha. Stop talking nonsense. Who do you think you are? You don't think you are the Emperor of the Sea, do you?" Kingsley Angus hugged his belly and laughed as if he had heard a huge joke. Shanks was noncommittal. He didn't bother to explain anything to the uninformed people. He just stood there and looked at Kingsley Angus like a clown. Because there were only 2 members of the Fang Pirates left, he didn't laugh for long. He laughed awkwardly for a while, then stood up straight and roared, "Damn you, kid, you secretly poisoned my crew. I can't forgive you." As he spoke, under the surprised eyes of all the red-haired pirates, he actually grabbed his trembling little brother, threw him towards Shanks, then bent down sharply, turned into a ferocious hyena, and fled into the distance. Although he is arrogant, he is not stupid. His many years of sailing on the sea told him that it must be unusual for these people in front of him to be so calm. At this moment, he regretted that he took the initiative to provoke this seemingly weak pirate group. Damn it, how could there be such a powerful guy in the East China Sea? Dong. Under the panicked gaze of the little brother who was thrown over, Shanks casually cut him in half with a knife. "It's really interesting, but isn't it too late for you to run away now?" An indifferent voice came from Kingsley Angus's ears. He was holding a piece of barbecue with one hand and already pressing it on Kingsley Angus's head with the other. With a boom, Kingsley Angus's head made close contact with the splint. The terrifying force shook the entire ship. A shocking large pit suddenly appeared on the deck, and dense cracks continued to spread. The next moment, Locky Lou held Kingsley Angus's head in front of Shanks and threw him to the ground like a dead dog. Kingsley Angus rolled on the ground a few times, raised his head with difficulty, and begged for mercy. "I'm sorry, I was wrong. I shouldn't have provoked you. Let me go. There are many treasures on my ship. Let me join you. I'm willing to be a trainee crew member and your dog." Advertisement. Shanks looked at Kingsley Angus condescendingly and said calmly, "Your ship? Sorry, this is our ship. Also, I still like your unruly look just now." Then under the horrified gaze of Kingsley Angus, Shanks raised the griffin in his hand. Kingsley Angus rolled his eyes and fainted. Shanks put away the griffin and looked at the distant sea, where a warship flying a seagull flag was approaching. "Marine is here." Lucky Lou took a bite of the barbecue and muttered. This group of Marines came at the right time. It's not easy to meet such a fat pirate group, and the treasures haven't been searched yet. Beckman turned the flintlock rifle in his hand and suggested, "Should we keep them?" Shanks shook his head and said with a smile, "There are 2 tough guys on the boat. Are we just going to leave like this? Our recent treasure has almost been spent." Behrman frowned. Shanks thought for a while and said slowly, "Don't worry, bring the treasure on the ship up." At the same time, on the other side, Karen is also considering whether to fight Shanks now. "My suggestion is to retreat first and wait for a reply from the headquarters. Of course, you are the commander of this warship, so you make the decision." Guion on the side looked at Karen, who was silent, and suggested, Want to retreat? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Even if you can't catch the red hair, this is still an opportunity to fight against the red hair. Karen understands that only by constantly fighting strong men can he become stronger, not to mention that the red-haired man is a Grandmaster Conqueror's domineering strong man. He has never touched the threshold of conquerors until now. Maybe after fighting Shanks, he can understand something. Ba, 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 huh. The voice of the phone came from Marine on the side. Gion and Karen looked at each other and took the phone. Moxie Moshi, this is Gion. A rough voice came from the phone bug. Advertisement, this is Garp. I heard that you met the red-haired pirates, the remnants of Roger's pirates, in the East China Sea? Karen took the phone bug from Gion's hand and said in a deep voice. Yes, Lieutenant General Garp. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect you to meet that brat Shanks. I'm also in the East China Sea now, but I'm just a little far away from your sea area, so I can't go to support you. Garp's regretful expression was perfectly replicated one-to-one by the phone bug. Are you also in Donghai? Yes, my hometown is in the East China Sea, and my grandson is born. He will definitely become a righteous marine like me in the future. When he mentioned his grandson, Garp looked excited. If it weren't for Shanks, I might have had a chance. Karen complained in her heart, then tapped the railing with her finger, thought for a while, and asked seriously. Should we arrest him? Of course, Marine is here to catch pirates. Garp replied with a smile. Gion reminded anxiously from the side. Lieutenant General Garp. With the combat power we have on board now, it may not be enough to rashly catch the red-haired pirates. Ha ha ha, it doesn't matter. I believe in you and Shanks. Garp's answer is a bit strange, but Karen can understand it. It can be seen through Luffy in the future that Shanks is not a traditional pirate, but like Luffy, he will not kill innocent people indiscriminately. In the plot, any pirate is more dangerous than the future One Piece. Karen's eyes lit up and he said solemnly, okay, I understand. No, what do you understand? Do you believe a pirate? Gion was speechless. Ha ha ha, this scene reminds me of how I hunted down Roger many years ago. It's really nostalgic. Garp's voice was filled with excitement and reminiscence, as well as a hint of sadness. This is inheritance. Gah. After hanging up the phone, Karen slowly exhaled, pulled out the Zangfeng behind him, and said in a deep voice. Pull the boat over. Chapter 54. Did I let you go? Advertisement. You guys stay on the boat, Major General Gion and I will go up and have a look. As soon as they got close to the red-haired pirates, Karen warned that although he knew that Shanks would not kill innocent people indiscriminately, if his side made the first move, the red-haired pirates might not let these Marines go. You are not allowed to take action without my order on the ship. Karen placed his eyes on Gion and ordered. Although Gion has a higher position than Karen, before going to sea, Karen made an agreement with Gion that he would be the supreme commander of the warship. Do you really believe in pirates? Gion rolled her eyes, she was a little nervous. Because of what she saw and heard, she could feel that the red-haired pirates were not easy to mess with, and this trip felt like a sheep entering a tiger's mouth. I don't believe in pirates, I believe in Lieutenant General Garp. Karen corrected, and then took Gion onto the big ship in front of him. As soon as he got on the big ship, Karen saw densely packed pirates lying on the ground. They were all foaming at the mouth and falling into coma. Unexpectedly, Shanks actually used hockey. In addition to the pirates lying on the ground, there was also a group of people who were carrying the treasure in an orderly manner. Even when they saw Karen wearing Marine's cloak of justice, they didn't stop moving, and they didn't care about Marine's arrival. At a glance, he saw Shanks busy in the crowd. At this time, Shanks had not left his arms in the East China Sea. He had a yellow straw hat on his head and was carrying treasures like other crew members. Karen saw many familiar people, including the vice-captain of the red-haired pirates, Shanks' right-hand Ben Beckman, Chef Locky Liu. I didn't see the sniper Jesus Bu. I guess he hasn't joined the red-haired pirates yet. Karen's heart sank, this was a bit difficult to handle. Unexpectedly, Shanks had assembled such a powerful crew at this time. However, he had expected it before coming, so he didn't feel disappointed. Karen took out a cigarette from his pocket, blew out a puff of white smoke, and said slowly. Hey, do you want to be so arrogant? Hearing this, all the crew members who were moving the treasure stopped for a moment, then dropped the treasure and gathered around Shanks. Oh, it came so fast. I wanted to move it for a while. Shanks patted his head in distress. I just told you to speed up. The captain insisted that Marine wouldn't come. Bearman on the side shook his head helplessly. Ha ha ha, the captain lost the bet again. The red-haired pirates burst into laughter, showing no respect for their captain. Shanks also laughed and didn't care. Gion looked at this scene, poked Karen's back with his finger, and then pointed at his head. The meaning was self-evident. Advertisement. Karen rolled his eyes speechlessly and joked in his mind that he was indeed a man who could take a blow from the Bandit King with his head. Then, he cleared his throat and said doubtfully, why do you say we won't come? Shanks stopped smiling, held up his hat, and answered seriously. Because you are powerful. Very powerful. Yes, because you are very powerful, you should also understand that we are also very powerful. The sentence was a bit convoluted, but Karen understood what Shanks meant. So why are you here? You should be able to feel that you are not our opponent. Shanks asked with curiosity on his face. Nothing, if you want to give me a reason. Karen showed a smile. Because we are Marines, not only you can show off, I can too. Shanks was stunned for a while, then suddenly laughed, tears of laughter came out. He laughed and said, interesting, interesting. I haven't met such an interesting Marine like you in a long time. If you weren't Marine, maybe we could be friends. Then he changed the topic and wanted to scare Karen away, so he threatened. But who said you were Marine? It is natural for Marine to catch pirates, so it is okay for pirates to kill Marine. After saying that, a powerful aura erupted from Shanks, pressing towards Karen and Guion. The faces of the crew members behind him all showed ferocious looks, and combined with Shanks' words, they really felt evil. The red-haired pirates are very kind to civilians, but that doesn't mean they are also kind to Marine. Cold sweat fell from Guion's forehead. She had spent some time in New World, so she naturally knew what Shanks' aura was like. I didn't expect to see Conqueror's hockey in the small East China Sea. Secretly made up his mind in his heart. Later, be sure to protect Karen and leave safely. With this thought in his mind, Guion quietly grabbed Jinpira in front of his waist, ready to draw his knife at any time to cover Karen's retreat. Karen didn't seem to feel the danger coming. He put a hand on the back of Guion's hand, threw the cigarette in his hand to the ground, stamped it out, and said calmly. Advertisement. Has Marine become friends with pirates? It's not like it has never happened before. Hearing this, Shanks suddenly stopped Conqueror's release, took a serious look at Karen, and asked with interest. You seem to know a lot of things? Karen stretched and looked directly into Shanks' eyes. More than you think. For example, someone's life experience. Shanks' expression froze, and he looked at Karen with a hint of danger. Karen ignored it and continued. For example, a certain big shot's child was adopted by Marine and... That's enough. Shanks interrupted Karen's words and said solemnly, what do you want? Karen put away the hand that grabbed Guion and said seriously, of course I came to arrest you on the order of Lieutenant General Garp. He deliberately pronounced Garp's name a little louder, although he didn't think Shanks would actually take action, it would be safer to mention Garp's name. Sure enough, when Shanks heard that Karen said that he was ordered by Garp to hunt him down, his attitude immediately improved a lot, and he frowned and fell into deep thought. Was it Garp who told him the news? Impossible, Garp will never tell anyone else about this. He knew Garp as well as Garp knew him, and only I know my life experience. Thinking of this, Shanks asked curiously, may I have your name? Karen raised a smile on her lips and said lightly, Karen. Karen, what's your relationship with Garp? Shanks asked. He is a Marine, and I am also a Marine. Of course, we are comrades in arms and colleagues. The smile on Karen's face grew wider. Although Garp said Karen was his eldest nephew, rather than say it, Shanks could guess. It feels good to have a background. Shanks took a deep look at Karen, then inserted the griffin in his hand into his waist, and the tense atmosphere disappeared. He raised his arms and shouted to the crew, retreat. Seeing that Shanks was about to leave without saying a word, Karen couldn't help but stop her. Did I let you go? Chapter 55 Confronting the Conquerors? Advertisement. As soon as Karen said this, she felt that it was not right. Sure enough, when Karen said this, Shanks's face suddenly became extremely gloomy. What do you want? Karen smiled awkwardly, pointed at Shanks' griffin, and said. I see that you are also a swordsman. It just so happens that I am too. We finally met each other. Why don't we give it a try? Competition? Ha ha ha. Shanks suddenly laughed. What are you laughing at? You remind me of a friend who is also a swordsman. You mean Mahawk? Karen guessed. Although it was a guess, his tone was full of certainty. Speaking of Shanks' swordsman friends, the most famous one must be the future #1 swordsman Hawkeye. Shanks said in surprise. Do you know him? I don't know him, but I've heard of him. If I have the chance, I'd also like to fight him. Really? Then you have to be careful, he is much scarier than me. Much scarier than you, I believe you ghost. Karen complained in his heart, then looked at Shanks expectantly and said slowly. How about it? Do you want to compete with me? How do you want to compare? I know that I am no match for you now. 3 moves are enough. Let me feel your domineering power. This is Karen's true purpose. There are not many opportunities to meet a conqueror's strong man who will not kill him. Maybe you can awaken your own conquerors through this battle. Do you feel domineering? Shanks nodded, understanding what Karen was thinking. Okay. With that said, he pulled out the griffin, and a terrifying pressure swept over Karen. This kind of domineering power is not the level Shanks used just now to scare away Karen. This kind of coercion is only for Karen. Under this terrifying pressure, Karen even had an urge to surrender. Although only a trace. Is this conqueror's, is this Shanks' courage? Advertisement. So what about your own courage? At this moment, Karen fell into confusion. Since he came to this world, he has been like a rootless duck with no one to care about and no one to care about him. He lived a very happy life in Marine, but his heart was deep. Everywhere is lonely. He has not really integrated into this world, and the reason why he chose to return to Shreely Town is because he wants to know what he will live for in the future. Although he felt in his heart that since he came to this world, he should live a wonderful life and see the majesty of the sea, but that was all, he had no goal. He is determined to become stronger, but he has no ambition to dominate the world. Can such a self really awaken the conquerors? Do you want me to be some kind of king? Karen shook his head, getting rid of the messy thoughts in his heart, and stared at Shanks intently. Shanks just stood there, neither moving forward nor attacking, just staring at Karen quietly. Karen drew out the Zangfang, and the armed color instantly wrapped around the entire sword body, and let out a deep breath. Be careful. God avoids. This move was both a prank on Karen and a test on Shanks. The moment he heard the words of God's avoidance, Shanks' face felt dazed for a moment. Really or not, it's really messy. Karen's body was like a cannonball, rushing towards Shanks at an alarming speed. Shanks didn't dodge or dodge, he just struck casually, and Griffin slashed hard at Karen. Boom. The sound of weapons clashing filled the sky. Karen only felt that his hands holding Zhang Feng were trembling slightly, and a terrifying strength spread from his arms to his whole body. The splint under his feet began to crack, spreading like a spider web in all directions. The next moment, Karen's figure flew out upside down and spun several times in the air before the terrifying force was released. Standing on the splint again, he shook his neck and murmured. Is this the four emperors of the future? Facing the real strong man in this sea, Karen felt his own shortcomings. At the moment of the collision, he felt that the armed color surrounding Zhang Feng was slowly dissipating. If Zhang Feng had not relieved himself in time, he would probably have lost his strength. He will also end up like Yuan Hong. Advertisement. The battle between masters is originally a competition between domineering characters. After all, he has only practiced his weapon color for a few days. Although Shanks has not reached the peak of his plot, he should not be underestimated even in his 20s. In terms of dominance, he is indeed inferior to Shanks. It can be said that most people are not as domineering as Shanks. The great people's teacher Kaidao once said that domineering power is above all else. Since you can't use hockey for close combat, then. Karen raised his head and stopped testing. A sword energy began to condense on the tip of the sword. This was his strongest long-range attack method and his strongest move. Curry stick. The dazzling light rushed up to the sky and fell hard on Shanks. Shanks put away the calm expression on his face, and he felt a hint of threat from Karen. Is it called a god's avoidance without conquerors? No matter, let me show you what a true god's avoidance is. His eyes narrowed slightly, countless black and red lightnings rose up on Shanks, and the griffin in his hand exploded with an aura that destroyed everything. God avoids. The two sword lights collided together. An overwhelming wave erupted, sweeping across the entire venue. This marine is extraordinary. He can actually let the captain use that move. Bellman stared at the two people with burning eyes, the cigarette in his mouth burning at a speed visible to the naked eye under the erosion of the huge waves. I'm afraid he will be a general in the future. Lucky Lu also stared at the two fighting men and gave Karen a high evaluation. This is not going to be easy for the captain. Although they said this, neither of them moved, they just looked at it. Guion, who was watching the battle on the other side, was not so relaxed. Her worry wasn't from Karen, but from Shanks' strength. Seeing Shanks' strength, she was deeply shocked. She thought she was already a genius in Marine and New World, but when she saw Shanks, who was about the same age as herself, she realized that there are people outside the world. If this pirate group cannot be killed in time, when it arrives in the New World, it will definitely change the current situation of the three emperors. I don't know if it's good or bad. Chapter 56. Sorry. Advertisement. The dazzling sword light began to slowly dissipate, revealing the devastation, and the Fang Pirates ship was split into two halves under the terrifying waves. Because it was just a collision of swords, Karen was not injured. He was breathing heavily and his body was shaking. Shanks, who stood opposite Cullen, was in much better condition than Cullen. He seemed to have never experienced anything and was just a spectator. Awesome, worthy of someone who has been on the One Piece ship. You're pretty good too. Shanks took Griffin back to his waist and showed a bright smile. Then he turned around and prepared to lead the crew away. Wait a minute. Karen stopped Shanks and said tremblingly. It's not over yet, there are 3 moves agreed upon. Shanks frowned. Do you still have the strength to take action now? Yes. Karen stood up straight, spat, and showed a bright smile. I have one last trick. Actually, I am a devil fruit user. The 2 moves just now were just a competition of swordsmanship. Next, I want to conduct a verification. He wanted to see if being 100% free-handed would be useful to someone who could use Conqueror's Haki. This was a rare opportunity for experimentation. What verification? Shanks asked curiously. Although he himself has never eaten a devil fruit, he has fought against many devil fruit users, so he understands that even devil fruit users need a strong body. And the current Karen station is not stable, so what can be verified? Karen didn't explain. He slowly raised the Tibetan Feng in his hand and said calmly, be careful. Then, Zhang Feng swung down hard. Look at the sword. The next moment, Shanks' figure suddenly appeared in front of Karen. He knelt on one knee, raised his hands high, and clamped the hidden edge of the sword. The whole place fell into silence, and everyone in the red-haired pirate group opened their mouths in disbelief. What devil fruit is this? Lucky Lou even forgot to chew the meat in his mouth. Beckman had a deep expression on his face and took a deep drag on his cigarette. I don't know, but this ability is very wrong. Even Paramesha, who is so defenseless, needs to be touched if she wants to influence other people. Is it the awakening of a devil fruit? Lucky Lou guessed. This is the only explanation for the current situation. Bellman put out the cigarette in his mouth and said slowly, probably not, but it cannot be ruled out. After all, this sea has many unimaginable abilities. Compared to the panicked red-haired pirates, Guion was much calmer. She herself had also been controlled by Karen's terrifying ability. Even she couldn't do anything about this ability. In her impression, only poor Salino had broken free from Karen's restraint. There was a moment of panic on Shanks' face. He had followed Roger on the sea since he was a child. He had seen countless devil fruits, but he had never heard of someone like Karen who could use them without any contact. Advertisement. The panic only appeared for a moment before Shanks showed a calm expression. The dark-armed color began to spread on his body. He tried to move his body and stand up, but the strength he exerted was like a mud cow entering the sea, unable to shake him at all. Interesting, Shanks murmured, and then conquerors began to rise in his body. The terrifying momentum gathered in his hands, and he exerted force suddenly, but he still couldn't move at all. Cold sweat fell from Shanks' forehead. This is definitely not the power of a devil fruit. He exclaimed. Hockey was above everything else, and when he used hockey, there was no reason why he would be suppressed by the power of the devil fruit. This is the power of devil fruit. Karen stared at Shanks, the excitement on his face palpable. Successful, even conquerors can't break the 100% chance of being caught empty-handed. Doesn't this mean that he will be able to win 100% against anyone without devil fruit abilities in the future? The moment this idea first arose, Karen suddenly felt a terrifying coercion rushing toward his head. His brain seemed to have been hit hard by something, and he felt dizzy. I can no longer hold the Zhangfeng in my hand. Zhangfeng fell to the ground, causing a crisp sound. Buzz. Karen covered her head and sat on the ground. As Zhangfeng fell, Shanks slowly stood up and helped Karen up. Are you okay? Karen waved his hand, picked up Zhangfeng, and said slowly. How did you do it? Shanks said with a smile. Your fruit ability is indeed terrifying. It can be used on me without touching it, and even my use of hockey cannot break through this shackles. If I hadn't fought with you just now and knew that your hockey intensity was not high, I would have really thought that my hockey was not as good as yours. Recalling the scene just now, Shanks' tone was filled with wonder. He paused, and then changed the topic. However, if I read it correctly, you can't move when you use this power. Karen nodded, not expecting Shanks to see his weakness so quickly. Good. Shanks continued. Advertisement. Honestly, when I couldn't break free with my hockey, I was a little panicked, but when I saw you were so weak and still had to maintain a posture, I had an idea in my mind. Since conquerors couldn't break free, I would use it to influence you. Quote. Sure enough, as you saw just now, I succeeded. Karen put away Zhangfeng and took out a cigarette from his arms without lighting it. Thank you. Shanks scratched the back of his head and asked in confusion, what? Thank you for cooperating with me in this verification. Karen said seriously. Nothing, but is your ability really a devil fruit? Really, it's Paramesha, the fruit of words. Okay, then this fruit is quite perverted. If I hadn't happened to know conquerors, I wouldn't have been able to do anything to you. Karen said calmly. You still have a partner. Shanks was stunned, looked at Karen deeply, and said slowly. Yes, I still have a partner, and I'm quite interested in you. How about you? Why don't you leave Marine and join me? Join Shanks. Karen was stunned and thought seriously. As Luffy's leader, Shanks was different from other pirates and did not have the airs of a captain, and his purpose of joining Marine had been completed. Not only did he learn the 6 styles, but he also learned domineering. Compared to Marine, joining the pirates will undoubtedly make him famous faster. Guion, who was on the side, was still listening. When he heard Shanks soliciting, Karen was still thinking. She couldn't help it anymore. She ran to Karen, pointed at Shanks and Karen's noses and cursed. Road. You want to join the pirates? Have you forgotten who slaughtered your hometown? Are you worthy of Teacher Zephyr by joining the pirates? And you, as a scum of the sea, you don't care if you don't keep your tail between your legs, but you still want to bewitch Marine, I will arrest you now. ###. Well, you can see that the curse was very dirty. As he spoke, he pulled out the Jinpailao and prepared to chop at Shanks. Seeing this, Karen quickly hugged Guion from behind and said with a wry smile, I didn't agree. Guion said angrily, but you are thinking about it. I didn't think about it, I just remembered something important. Real. So, what's your answer? Karen pressed the Jinpaira in Guion's hand, smiled at each other and said seriously. Sorry, I'm Marine. Chapter 57 Baby. Advertisement. Shanks led his pirate group to leave. This time, Karen and Guion did not stop him from leaving, nor did they allow Shanks to recover the treasures looted from the Fang Pirates. It's really frustrating, Gion muttered as he looked at the red-haired pirates who were gradually driving away. There's nothing we can do about it. We have too few people with us. If we are with Lieutenant General Garp, we may still have a chance to arrest him. Karen lit the cigarette in his mouth and said slowly. With Red Hair's strength, why would he appear in the East China Sea? Gion said. It stands to reason that the more powerful the pirates are, the less likely they are to appear in the East China Sea. They should go to the New World to compete for territory. I don't know. Since it has been reported, let the headquarters consider it. Karen had a guess in his mind. He thought Shanks might be after the fruit, but he didn't know if he could get it. Gion looked at the wreckage all over the ground and asked with a headache, what should we do now? Go back first, gather people, and take these garbage back. Back on the warship, Karen and Gion looked at each other and quickly ran towards the bow. The Marines who were originally on guard on the warship were all lying on the ground, unconscious. Karen breathed out, as expected of Conqueror's domineering spirit. Gion's face looked a little ugly. Although he knew that these Marines were of no use, he didn't expect to faint without even seeing the red-haired face. She angrily kicked the sleeping Marine and cursed angrily. No, when I get back, I will report it to Teacher Zephyr and ask him to strengthen his training. Karen looked at Gion with some humor. Don't embarrass these Marines, and don't embarrass Teacher Zephyr. What do you mean? Gion glared at Karen. How many Conquerors are there in Marine? How can we ask teachers to strengthen their training on Conquerors? Karen touched his nose and explained, then shook Jesse lying on the ground awake. Wake up. Colonel. Major. Jesse shook his head, stood up slowly, and said blankly, what's wrong with me? Nothing. Let's wake them all up first. Karen patted Jesse on the shoulder and said with a smile. Only then did Jesse see the densely packed comrades lying on the warship, and then quickly squatted down and began to wake up the unconscious comrades. Soon, everyone was woken up. They looked at Karen blankly, waiting for Karen's instructions. Well, you go and arrest all the pirates on that ship, and bring up the treasures they looted. Yes, sir. They all rushed to the deck of the Fang Pirates with excited expressions, looking at the densely packed pirates lying on the ground with astonishment on their faces. Is this all Colonel Cullen's doing? Otherwise, look at these cracks, they are obviously caused by Colonel Cullen's sword strikes. Jesse pointed to a huge ravine, his face full of admiration and enthusiasm. Advertisement. Sir, a total of 103 pirates were arrested this time, including Kingsley Angus, the captain of the Fang Pirates. The excitement on Jess's face was palpable. Well, good, lock them up, and remember to lock Kingsley Angus in the sea tower cell. Yes, sir. Karen looked at the busy people, then walked to the deck, ready to enjoy the sea breeze and enjoy the beautiful scenery. As soon as he arrived on the deck, he found Gion leaning against the bulwark in a daze. What are you thinking about? Karen greeted Gion. I wonder why they became pirates. Gion didn't look back, with a hint of melancholy in his tone. Forced by life. Karen also leaned on the bulwark and answered casually. Gion turned to look at him and said to himself, who is forcing you, the world government? Karen was silent for a while and said slowly, who knows, maybe he was forced by the pirates. Gion didn't speak, and Karen continued, but no matter what they are forced to do, they should not become pirates. Yes, since you choose to become a pirate, you must be prepared to be arrested by Marine. Gion's voice was loud, and then she suddenly said, have you considered becoming a pirate just now? Karen was startled, then smiled bitterly and said, why should I become a pirate? Marine General Zephyr is my teacher, and Marine hero Garp also has a close relationship with me. I'm out of my mind. I'm going to be a good Marine instead of being a pirate. Pirates. Gion stared at Karen and said in a low voice, you promise not to become a pirate? I promise. Karen was about to answer when a quick voice interrupted the two of them. Colonel, I found a child on a pirate's ship. Okay, I'll go take a look. After Karen answered, he didn't rush down. Instead, he stared into Gion's eyes and said solemnly, I promise. Gion nodded heavily and avoided Karen's gaze. Okay, let's go down and have a look. When Karen and Gion came to the cabin, they found that the place where the treasure was stored was crowded with people. What's going on? Karen squeezed through the crowd and asked. Jesse saw Karen coming and quickly called everyone to move a place for Karen. Advertisement. Colonel, it was she who found it in a chest of treasures. As he spoke, Jesse pointed to a box located high up. Karen followed Jesse's guidance and saw a baby lying in the box. The moment he saw it, his face was full of astonishment. With her chubby little face and half-closed eyes, she sometimes smiled silly and sometimes sucked her little finger. The most impressive thing is that she has red and white hair. It's her, Yuta. He remembered that in the plot, Shanks discovered Yuta from the treasure pile on the pirate ship after fighting with a pirate group. Karen looked at the baby in front of him, a little at a loss. Such a coincidence. You know her. Gion, who was also observing Yuta, saw the shock on Karen's face. I know. No, I don't know. Karen answered unconsciously, not knowing how to explain it. Gion looked at Yuta for a while, then looked at Karen, frowning, Do you recognize him or not? I don't know. Karen quickly denied. Gion asked suspiciously. Really? Really? Karen wiped the non-existent sweat from her face. His mind was active. Why is this happening? As a time traveler, one of his biggest reliances is his familiarity with future stories. But now, due to his intervention, Shanks did not rescue Yuta, nor did he recognize Yuta as his daughter. What impact will this incident have on the original plot? Karen raised his head blankly, and Shanks' ship had already disappeared. Just because Yuta was not taken away, it shouldn't have much impact, right? At the same time, on the other side, Shanks was sitting on the bow of the boat wearing a straw hat, lost in thought. Bellman blew out a puff of smoke and asked nonchalantly, "What's wrong? Are you still thinking about that marine just now?" Shanks glanced at Bearman, stood up from the bow, and said with a smile. "No, but he is indeed very interesting. If we meet again in the future, interesting things will definitely happen." Chapter 58 An Uneasy Night. Advertisement. Wow wow wow. A child's cry broke the tranquility of the night, and Karen sat up from the bed with an ugly expression. He lit a cigarette and looked gloomy. After a while, he heard a knock on his door, and Karen stood up and opened the door. Gion held a baby with a tired look on his face and kept talking about something. Seeing Karen open the door, her eyes lit up and she quickly handed the baby in her arms to Karen. "You are the Supreme Commander, you take care of me, I won't take care of you anymore." Then he closed the door tightly as if he was running away, leaving Karen looking at a loss. Wow wow wow. The baby's crying continued. Karen held the baby, stood at the gate of Gion, and knocked several times. After a full minute, there was no sign of the gate of opening in Gion. He held the baby with a headache and slowly sat down on the sofa in the living room. In his 2 lifetimes, he has never been a father, let alone a baby, he has never even taken care of a child. Looking at the white and tender baby, Karen quickly put out the cigarette in her mouth and was lost in thought. Why is Yuta in Karen's room? Why is it in the hands of Gion? Karen was lost in memories. What are you going to do? Gion asked, twiddling his fingers. Karen thought for a while and said helplessly, "What else can I do? Let's keep it first." Then he looked at Jessie and asked, "Have you ever found out where the pirates snatched this kid from?" I asked. "It's on an island ahead. The Fang Pirates just looted that island." "Is there a massacre of the island?" Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. "No, but someone was killed." Jessie suddenly felt the slightest chill in Colonel Cullen, who had always been gentle. "What about this child's parents?" Karen said calmly. Jessie angrily replied. "Killed." Karen was silent. Also, if Yuta's parents were not dead, Shanks would definitely give Yuta back with his character. "Are there too many pirates in the cell?" "It's a bit crowded." Karen suddenly said in a calm tone. "Find out who did it, then choose 10 pirates and kill them all." Jessie was stunned and said with some embarrassment, "It's Kingsley Angus, the captain of the Fang Pirates." "Kill," Karen said calmly. Gion reminded. "The headquarters has regulations that those with devil fruit abilities captured alive must be sent to Impel." Advertisement. When was he captured alive? If I remember correctly, he must have been dead when I caught him. Karen glanced at Gion and said calmly. "You will lose a lot of military merit if you do this, and you may even be punished. And in Impel, he will never feel easy. It will be more torture than killing him directly. Do I need military merit?" As for torture, Karen paused and continued, "People are very adaptable." Gion's eyes were locked on Karen. Suddenly, the corners of her mouth raised slightly, and then she broke out into a cheeky and charming smile. "Ha ha ha, very good. You are indeed the person I like. I saw you right." Then, she slowly put away her smile and said to Jessie, "Go ahead." "Yes, Colonel Cullen, Major General Gion." Jessie looked excited and quickly ran towards the bottom of the cabin. "What about this child?" Gion said. "Her parents were killed, and I don't know if she has any relatives on that island." Karen also had a headache when mentioning this. He looked around and said calmly, "Which of you has experience in raising children?" The surrounding Marines looked at each other in confusion, but no one spoke. They were all old men. They had been wandering in the sea for so many years and had no experience in taking care of children. An older soldier at the head stood up and said slowly, "Colonel, although some of us have children, women have an advantage when it comes to taking care of children." His eyes swept across the companions around him, and everyone nodded in agreement. Karen's eyes lit up and she looked at Gion, seeing a hint of expectation and shyness in her eyes. "There is also a maternal radiance." Karen tentatively asked, "How about you give it a try?" ... Wow wow wow. The baby's cry awakens Karen from the memory. He looked at Yuta in his arms and felt that one was as big as the other. He wanted to light a cigarette, but he retracted the hand that reached into his arms. Did I steal Shanks' daughter? Even when things got to this point, he still felt it was unreal. Seeing that Gion had given up his career, he could only smile bitterly. No one told him that children could cry so much. Karen awkwardly turned Yuta over. This time, her crying became louder. Hey, little ancestor, don't cry." Karen was in a hurry and at a loss. Even if he was trained to death, he didn't want to be tortured. What to do, what to do. Yes, children all like to listen to stories. Advertisement. Karen cleared her throat lightly and whispered. Once upon a time, in a distant country, there was a famous mountain called Wagwo Mountain, and there was a fairy stone on the mountain. Crack. Karen gave herself a hard mouth. I am really crazy, telling a story to a baby, can she understand it? It was with this crisp sound that Yuta miraculously stopped crying. She looked at Karen with a curious look on her face and seemed to find it very interesting. Hey, what's with your expectant eyes? Wow wow wow. Karen had a headache and looked at his palms, then looked at Yuta, hesitant. Finally, he made up his mind. Sleep, sleep, my dear baby. ... The next day, Gion walked out of the bedroom door refreshed. As soon as he walked into the living room, he saw Karen sleeping soundly on the table, and Yuta, who was also sleeping on the sofa next to him. Thinking of what happened last night, her cheeks turned red. Feeling distressed, I walked up to Karen and stared at his handsome face, the blush on his face getting even worse. Stretching out his hand, he wanted to carry Karen to the bed. As soon as she touched Karen, Karen grabbed her wrist fiercely. The force from her wrist made her almost fall into Karen's arms. The fragrance was soft in his arms, and with their eyes facing each other, Karen could clearly see who the person was. He let go of his hand in embarrassment, as if he had thought of something, turned to look at Yuta, and slowly exhaled. Fortunately she was not woken up. What are you doing? Karen lowered her voice and looked at Gion with a critical eye. Gion rolled his eyes at Karen and replied in a low voice. I see you are too tired, so I want to send you to the bedroom to rest. Karen said angrily. You still know that I'm tired. Who gave her to me last night? Gion's face turned red and he was speechless. Okay, you can take care of her for a while, and I'll catch up on my sleep. Karen stretched and yawned. Gion suddenly leaned into Karen's ear and whispered, the song last night was very nice. Karen's movements froze, and then he came to his senses. He looked at Gion up and down, and suddenly he put his eyes on Gion's soft breasts and nodded with satisfaction. Where are you looking? Gion took a step back warily. Karen said maliciously. Well, that's right. She'll be hungry soon. Remember to feed her something to drink. Chapter 59 Cradle. Advertisement. When Karen opened her eyes again, it was already noon. When he opened the door, he found Gion sitting on the sofa, lost in thought. Karen's sound of pushing the door woke her up. Gion didn't even raise her head and said calmly, Are you awake? Well, it's already noon, have you eaten? Karen felt a sense of hunger in her stomach. No. Gion changed his position, leaned on the sofa, and said angrily, I eat the food you cook every day. I am not used to eating other people's food now. Although Karen's meal had a lot of aftereffects, it was indeed delicious. And she has figured out the right way to eat it. Karen touched his nose and said awkwardly, I'll do it later. By the way, where's Yuta? Yuta. Gion glanced at Karen, thoughtfully. Only then did Karen realize that he had actually called her name, and pretended to be calm and said, well, that's the little baby. You do know her. Gion stared into Karen's eyes. No, I don't know her. Karen hurriedly explained. I just think she should be called this name. Really? Gion said noncommittally. Karen quickly changed the subject and asked, where is she? Gion withdrew his gaze and explained. Not long after you entered the bedroom, she woke up. I thought she might be hungry, so I asked someone to find some goat's milk. After drinking it, she fell asleep. I put her down, entering the bedroom. Oh, okay, I'll wash up and then go cook. Karen nodded, left a word, and ran to the bathroom. After washing up and making a few simple dishes, Gion would take the portioned meals back to the bedroom to eat. Seeing this, Karen quickly stopped her. His eyes were sincere and his tone was sincere. Yuta is inside, you can eat here. I promise not to watch. Gion met Karen's serious gaze, rolled his eyes, and then quickly walked towards Karen's room. Karen's eyes were dull, and she muttered a pity to herself, then carefully checked the door and took off her shirt. That's right, he eats his own food and eats his own clothes. Advertisement. In order to avoid damaging his clothes, he takes off his shirt every time before eating. Apart. Karen burped with satisfaction and used life return to absorb the energy in her stomach. Frowning slightly, he found that his body seemed a little saturated, and he didn't feel strong after eating recently. Could it be that the return of life can only be enhanced to this extent? Although his current physique is already very strong, he is still far behind from being a real strong man. Not to mention anything else, even the Shanks he met the day before yesterday were stronger than his current physique. It was after the battle with Shanks yesterday that he felt a little stronger when absorbing energy. Sure enough, we still have to fight against the strong, we can't act like this anymore. Putting on his shirt, Karen walked into Gion's bedroom. As soon as he entered, he saw Yuta sleeping soundly. She closed her pink mouth tightly and breathed out an even sound. Her round belly rose and fell, and she slept soundly and sweetly. Who can imagine that this is the most famous singer in the future? Wait, singer. Thinking of her own lullaby from last night, it's not because of this that she became interested in music. Karen was running through thoughts in her mind. Crunch. There was a sound of the door opening behind him, and Guion walked out of Karen's bedroom with a flushed face, carrying the tableware. As soon as she went out, she saw Karen standing at the door of her bedroom. She wanted to speak but Karen stopped her with a gesture. Karen raised her left index finger to her mouth, indicating that Guion should be silent. He didn't want to sing the lullaby again. Guion showed his understanding little by little and stopped talking. He quietly packed away Karen's leftover food in the living room and returned to the kitchen to wash up. Of course, this was not what Karen asked for, but she felt that since she had eaten Karen's food, she should take on the small task of washing up. Karen observed for a while and saw that Yuta was sleeping soundly, so he gently closed the door and returned to the living room. Looking at Guion being washed, he felt peaceful in his heart. Advertisement. This kind of life is not bad. Dong dong dong. There was a knock on the door. Karen stood up, walked to the door, and opened the door. Major General, this is you. A Marine outside the door pushed a wooden structure. Seeing clearly that it was Karen, he changed his words. Colonel, this is what Major General Guion asked me to prepare. Karen looked closely and found that the thing looked very much like a cradle chair. It was clear in my heart at that moment. I didn't expect that Guion was so careful and even asked someone to prepare this thing. Push forward. Karen moved his body and moved away from the door. Marine, who was pushing the cradle chair, nodded and gently pushed the cradle chair into the living room. Only then did Karen realize that there were two people standing behind him. One was the head chef Saxton, whom Karen was very familiar with. He and a man dressed as a chef were carrying a heavy bottle with white flowers inside, which should be Yuta. Food, goat milk. Karen nodded and guided them to put their things away. Then he took out a box of cigarettes from his arms and distributed one to each person. Thanks for your hard work. It's not hard. Saxton took the cigarette but did not light it. He squinted his eyes slightly and took a deep breath. Ah, this smell, the Colonel's smell, is still so charming no matter how many times I smell it. Karen's eyesight went dark, and his face was covered with black lines. Ah, no, I mean the smell made by Colonel Cullen. Saxton smiled and said, this smell is so good, do you really not consider accepting a disciple? Karen shrugged helplessly and said with a wry smile, it's not that I don't teach it, but it's really the ability of the devil fruit and I can't teach it. Seeing Saxton's disappointed expression, he felt a little uncomfortable. He knew that Saxton was a person who truly loved food. Well, next time you have a chance, you can watch me cooking, but I really can't explain it. Really? That's great. Saxton looked excited. Do you have time now? No, Karen said angrily. Okay, you must call me next time you cook. Chapter 60 Shark Night. Advertisement. The sailing warship slowly docked on a small island, which was a small island called Sundai Island. They will replenish fresh water and food on the island before setting sail again the next day. After the battle with Shanks, Karen spent a relatively good life on the warship, and gradually became bored with the scenery on the sea. The relationship between him and Guion has also become subtle because of Yuta's existence. During the day, they trained together, and their mutual understanding gradually grew through sweat and hard work. When night fell, they took care of Yuta together, like a real family. What a fulfilling day. Karen stood at the bow of the boat and stretched. Standing next to him was Guion. She was pushing a stroller, and Yuta was sitting in the stroller. She opened her big eyes and looked at everything around her curiously. Guion pinched Yuta's little nose and said with a smile, we finally arrived at a small island. I will buy you some beautiful clothes later. Then she raised her head and asked, what about you, do you want to go down and play for a while? Karen smiled. Of course. The port of Sundai Island is not large, and there are not many ships coming and going. There are only a few scattered fishing boats moored in the port. As soon as Karen's warship docked, it attracted the attention of nearby fishermen. Marine is here. Didn't these vampires just come here a few days ago? Why are they here again? I just know how to collect money, but I don't do anything when I meet pirates. Bah. It's called Marine, but it's just a larger pirate group. The sound of their discussion was very low, but Karen still heard it. He frowned. He didn't expect that Marine's reputation in this country was so bad. However, he was not surprised. He thought of Colonel Mouse who colluded with the errand pirates in the plot, and the Axe King Monka, who abused his power in the fish and meat village. But he also understands that Marine as a whole cannot be judged based on one word. Every organization has its strengths and weaknesses, and individual behavior cannot fully represent the entire group. Perhaps, there are some problems and challenges within this Marine, but this does not mean that everyone should be denied. Most Marines are just. But since he is a Marine, he will naturally not allow scum among Marines to affect all Marines. It just so happened that he also felt a little bored recently, so he just happened to kill time here. Waving his hand, Jesse walked to Karen's side. Advertisement. Go to the island in a while, investigate Marine's reputation here, and find out why. Yes. After ordering Jesse, Karen returned to the cabin, took off the Marine uniform and put on casual clothes. You take Yuta shopping first, and I'll go investigate. Karen came to Guion and said casually. Guion nodded and said nothing more. The town on Sundai Island is called Nabaran Bay Town. This town is not prosperous, but the scenery is very beautiful. It is located right in the center of Sundai Island. The town is surrounded by water. From a height, it looks like an island within an island. The streets of the town are narrow and busy, and the shops and buildings on both sides are close to each other. The vendors are shouting at the door of their stores, and the sounds are loud and lively. Pedestrians shuttle through the bustling streets, either in a hurry or leisurely. The streets are still filled with various aromas, including the aroma of freshly baked bread, freshly ground coffee, and the aroma of gourmet food wafting from street restaurants. Karen walked in the lively town and felt the vitality exuded by the town. Of course he was not walking aimlessly. Finally, he followed the road signs and came to a bar. The rooftop of this bar is impressive, with a giant model of a shark's head hanging from it. The shark's head is lifelike, and there is a red wine glass in its hand. There is even red liquid in it, which shines alluringly under the sunlight. Karen glanced at the sign. Shark Night. Could this be a bar run by the fishmen? Karen secretly guessed in her heart. Withdrawing his gaze, he pushed open the door and realized that the soundproofing of this bar was particularly good because it was very lively inside. He had heard nothing while standing at the door just now. Because he was wearing plain clothes, Karen's arrival did not attract much attention. He walked slowly to the bar and ordered a glass of wine, then walked to the corner and sat down. Less than 5 minutes after sitting down, a skinny old man sat opposite Karen with his own drink. Sir, you look like an adventurer. Oh, I mean you look like a pirate hunter. The old man who greeted me had knife marks on his face and a deep temperament. He looked very untouchable. How do you know? Karen asked noncommittally. Advertisement. You look unfamiliar. I have lived in this town for 7 or 8 years and have never seen you before. The old man explained. Then it's possible that I'm a new marine, or I'm not sure I'm a pirate. Karen picked up the wine glass and took a sip. The wine was not bad and very strong. Are you kidding? He tilted his head slightly, glanced around with the corner of his eye, and lowered his voice. Those Marines usually wear uniforms when they go out, and they look arrogant. They want to have the word Marine plastered on their faces. With a touch of sarcasm in his tone, he continued, Marine doesn't know how to be humble and restrained. They are simply mad dogs. As for pirates, most of them are bloodthirsty and cruel, worse than mad dogs. His eyes showed deep disgust, as if he had seen the ugly faces of those pirates. Maybe I'm just a businessman passing by, Karen retorted. The old man glanced at Zhang Feng behind Karen and smiled. You can't fool me. You don't have the temperament of a businessman. Yes, I am indeed a pirate hunter. Karen responded calmly. The old man took a sip of strong wine, his face flushed. I knew it, I've never made a mistake before. Karen frowned slightly and moved away from him. I have a business, are you interested? The old man stretched out his hand and wanted to hook Karen's neck, but Karen stopped him with a look. What business? Karen's eyes showed a hint of threat, warning the old man not to get too close to him. You know. The old man opened his mouth and was about to say something. Suddenly, he was interrupted by a noisy voice. Girls and gentlemen, now comes our highlight, the mermaid show. The speaker was a strong man over 2 meters tall. He wore a white vest, showing strong muscles, and had a shark tattoo on his arm. As he spoke, he waved his hand and pushed out a huge box from behind. The box was covered with a huge black cloth, making it impossible to see what was inside. Oh, haha, I'm finally here. I came here to drink just to see this. After the strong man made his announcement, there was a burst of noisy screams and shouts from around him. Only then did Karen understand why the business of this bar was so good. You must know that this is the East China Sea, and mermaids are not common in the East China Sea. Only the old man beside Karen remained unmoved and took another sip of wine as if nothing had happened. But Karen keenly caught a look of sadness on the old man's face, although it was only for a moment. That's what I want to say. I want you to help me rescue her. Chapter 61 Story. Advertisement. The black curtain was slowly lifted, finally revealing its true face. It was a huge glass fish tank. There was a young girl in the fish tank. She had pink hair, which fell down on her back like a waterfall, gently brushing through the water. It was as smooth as silk and had big blue eyes. Like a deep ocean, full of mystery and tenderness. Her skin showed a light pink color, delicate and smooth, shining like pearls. The elegant figure and the charmingly shining fish tail highlight her identity. Oh, it's really a mermaid. Miss Delica, I am your fan. Is this the mermaid? She is so beautiful. I really want to take her home. I heard that she is a mermaid slave bought by the boss Donahue with a lot of money. With the appearance of Delica, there was a commotion in the surrounding area. Delica seemed to have been used to this scene for a long time. Her eyes were clear and firm, and she quietly watched the noisy crowd. Okay, be quiet. Seeing that the time was almost up, the giant man with the shark tattoo nodded with satisfaction. He cleared his throat and said loudly. Next is the highlight of our giant shark night, where our beautiful mermaid Miss Delica sings a song for everyone. Okay, I can finally hear Miss Delica's singing. Delica, Delica, Delica. The atmosphere was quickly stirred up by Donahue. He nodded to Delica in the fish tank, and then Delica began to sing loudly, and a burst of sweet notes flowed out like a clear spring. Karen listened for a while and found that her singing voice was indeed very nice. It sounded better than many stars he had heard in his previous life. Advertisement. What did you just say? Karen admired it for a while and then looked at the skinny old man in front of him. The old man seemed to be caught in some kind of memory. He exhaled a long breath with sincerity in his voice. I want you to help me rescue her. Help you. Save. Karen keenly noticed the key point. Well, the old man stared blankly at Delica performing in the bathtub, and said in a deep voice, Delica is my daughter. I've never heard that humans can give birth to mermaids. Karen retorted casually. You should go into more detail. Of course she is not my child, alas, the old man replied subconsciously. Then, he thought about it and reorganized his words. She is actually my savior. Then without waiting for Karen to ask again, he told the story about him and Delica. The first time I met her was on a ship. At that time, I was still very young. Haha, maybe not too young. It was a pirate ship heading to the New World. When I was young, I was a businessman. At that time, I was preparing to go to the New World with a batch of goods to sell the goods at a high price. In order to prevent accidents, I specially found a reliable caravan. In the end, the accident happened again. It happened, we were robbed by a huge pirate ship. There was blood and dead people everywhere. In order to survive, I knelt down to the pirates, hoping they would let me go. At this point, the old man's face was full of fear and ferocity, and he cried bitterly, I know I'm cowardly, but I have no choice. I want to live and I don't want to die. Fortunately, those damn pirates were short of manpower at that time, so I managed to survive and work as a handyman on that pirate ship. Later I found out that the pirate ship I boarded was a slave-catching pirate ship, and then I met Delica. She was the same as now, locked in a fish tank by the damn pirates. Her eyes were very beautiful, but I didn't dare to look into her eyes, because I was afraid that I would let her out secretly. Quote. Because I work as a part-time job, one of my jobs is to feed food, so I had the opportunity to chat with Delica. From her, I learned a lot about New World, and also about the relationship between humans and fish people in New World. Attitude. I didn't expect that there is a system of slavery at the center of the world's power. It's really ridiculous. Advertisement. The old man looked sarcastic and took another big sip of wine. He gradually became a little drunk. He murmured. Fortunately, we encountered a storm later. The storm was very big. I have never seen such a storm. Big storm, it's like the world's punishment for these scum. Soon, all the ships sank in the storm. I found the key at the last moment and released Delica. Later, I was naturally rescued by Delica. Then Delica and I came here after a period of wandering. Wait a minute, this is the East China Sea. How did you end up in the East China Sea when you encountered a shipwreck in the second half of the Grand Line? Karen discovered the blind spot and asked, didn't you encounter other islands during the drifting? I don't know, but I guess that Delica and I were probably swept here by the windless storm. Karen nodded, feeling that the old man's guess was right. When I came to this island, I realized that mermaids can actually open their tails into legs when they land on land. Karen's mind moved, and he glanced at Delica in surprise. It is said that mermaids can turn their tails into legs when they are over 30 years old and live on land. It turns out that Delica is already over 30 years old. It is completely invisible. Later, Delica and I started living together in this town. In order to prevent Delica's identity from being discovered, we all addressed ourselves as father and daughter to the outside world. We spent a very wonderful 5 years together, said. At this point, Karen actually saw happiness and tranquility from the scarred face of the old man. Suddenly, the old man seemed to recall something bad, and he hit his head violently with his hand. It's all my fault, it's all my fault, it's all my fault, ah. Karen quickly stretched out his hand to stop the old man's movement. When the old man raised his head again, he burst into tears and said in a trembling voice, I have always had the habit of drinking. I'm drunk. How could I be drunk? I actually used the first few. What happened in 2006 was told here and in this place. Karen looked at the wine glass in the old man's hand speechlessly, and complained in his heart that he was still drinking even though he knew that something would happen to him if he drank. Of course they didn't believe it, because no one would believe what a drunkard said, let alone a drunk drunkard, and I actually took Delica myself and asked her to demonstrate to them that she was a real mermaid. I will never forget Delica's look of help, but I was drunk, I was really drunk, and I don't know why I would do such a thing. I actually forced Delica to turn into a mermaid in public. I'm so damned good. Chapter 61 Story. Advertisement. The black curtain was slowly lifted, finally revealing its true face. It was a huge glass fish tank. There was a young girl in the fish tank. She had pink hair, which fell down on her back like a waterfall, gently brushing through the water. It was as smooth as silk and had big blue eyes. Like a deep ocean, full of mystery and tenderness. Her skin showed a light pink color, delicate and smooth, shining like pearls. The elegant figure and the charmingly shining fish tail highlight her identity. Oh. It's really a mermaid. Miss Delica, I am your fan. Is this the mermaid? She is so beautiful. I really want to take her home. I heard that she is a mermaid slave bought by the boss Donahue with a lot of money. With the appearance of Delica, there was a commotion in the surrounding area. Delica seemed to have been used to this scene for a long time. Her eyes were clear and firm, and she quietly watched the noisy crowd. Okay, be quiet. Seeing that the time was almost up, the giant man with the shark tattoo nodded with satisfaction. He cleared his throat and said loudly. Next is the highlight of our giant shark night, where our beautiful mermaid Miss Delica sings a song for everyone. Okay, I can finally hear Miss Delica's singing. Delica. The atmosphere was quickly stirred up by Donahue. He nodded to Delica in the fish tank, and then Delica began to sing loudly, and a burst of sweet notes flowed out like a clear spring. Karen listened for a while and found that her singing voice was indeed very nice. It sounded better than many stars he had heard in his previous life. Advertisement. What did you just say? Karen admired it for a while and then looked at the skinny old man in front of him. The old man seemed to be caught in some kind of memory. He exhaled a long breath with sincerity in his voice. I want you to help me rescue her. Help you. Save. Karen keenly noticed the key point. Well, the old man stared blankly at Delica performing in the bathtub, and said in a deep voice, Delica is my daughter. I've never heard that humans can give birth to mermaids. Karen retorted casually. You should go into more detail. Of course she is not my child, alas, the old man replied subconsciously. Then, he thought about it and reorganized his words. She is actually my savior. Then without waiting for Karen to ask again, he told the story about him and Delica. The first time I met her was on a ship. At that time, I was still very young. Haha, maybe not too young. It was a pirate ship heading to the New World. When I was young, I was a businessman. At that time, I was preparing to go to the New World with a batch of goods to sell the goods at a high price. In order to prevent accidents, I specially found a reliable caravan. In the end, the accident happened again. It happened, we were robbed by a huge pirate ship. There was blood and dead people everywhere. In order to survive, I knelt down to the pirates, hoping they would let me go. At this point, the old man's face was full of fear and ferocity, and he cried bitterly, I know I'm cowardly, but I have no choice. I want to live and I don't want to die. Fortunately, those damn pirates were short of manpower at that time, so I managed to survive and work as a handyman on that pirate ship. Later I found out that the pirate ship I boarded was a slave-catching pirate ship, and then I met Delica. She was the same as now, locked in a fish tank by the damn pirates. Her eyes were very beautiful, but I didn't dare to look into her eyes, because I was afraid that I would let her out secretly. Quote. Because I work as a part-time job, one of my jobs is to feed food, so I had the opportunity to chat with Delica. From her, I learned a lot about New World, and also about the relationship between humans and fish people in New World. Attitude. I didn't expect that there is a system of slavery at the center of the world's power. It's really ridiculous. Advertisement. The old man looked sarcastic and took another big sip of wine. He gradually became a little drunk. He murmured. Fortunately, we encountered a storm later. The storm was very big. I have never seen such a storm. Big storm, it's like the world's punishment for these scum. Soon, all the ships sank in the storm. I found the key at the last moment and released Delica. Later, I was naturally rescued by Delica. Then Delica and I came here after a period of wandering. Wait a minute, this is the East China Sea. How did you end up in the East China Sea when you encountered a shipwreck in the second half of the Grand Line? Karen discovered the blind spot and asked, didn't you encounter other islands during the drifting? I don't know, but I guess that Delica and I were probably swept here by the windless storm. Karen nodded, feeling that the old man's guess was right. When I came to this island, I realized that mermaids can actually open their tails into legs when they land on land. Karen's mind moved, and he glanced at Delica in surprise. It is said that mermaids can turn their tails into legs when they are over 30 years old and live on land. It turns out that Delica is already over 30 years old. It is completely invisible. Later, Delica and I started living together in this town. In order to prevent Delica's identity from being discovered, we all addressed ourselves as father and daughter to the outside world. We spent a very wonderful 5 years together, said. At this point, Karen actually saw happiness and tranquility from the scarred face of the old man. Suddenly, the old man seemed to recall something bad, and he hit his head violently with his hand. It's all my fault, it's all my fault, it's all my fault, ah. Karen quickly stretched out his hand to stop the old man's movement. When the old man raised his head again, he burst into tears and said in a trembling voice, I have always had the habit of drinking. I'm drunk. How could I be drunk? I actually used the first few. What happened in 2006 was told here and in this place. Karen looked at the wine glass in the old man's hand speechlessly, and complained in his heart that he was still drinking even though he knew that something would happen to him if he drank. Of course they didn't believe it, because no one would believe what a drunkard said, let alone a drunk drunkard, and I actually took Delica myself and asked her to demonstrate to them that she was a real mermaid. I will never forget Delica's look of help, but I was drunk, I was really drunk, and I don't know why I would do such a thing. I actually forced Delica to turn into a mermaid in public. I'm so damned good. Chapter 62 Collusion. Advertisement. If it's really like what you said, you really deserve to die, Karen secretly cursed in her heart. What happened next? Karen asked calmly. Later. Ha ha ha. What else happened later? They were taken away on the charge that Delica was a slave. When she showed up again, she became a guest performer here. I found Donahue and asked him what was going on. He told Delica was bought by him. It's all my fault, it's all my fault. The old man held his head and cried bitterly. Suddenly, the old man's hands grasped Karen tightly like iron pliers, as if a drowning man was desperately grabbing the last straw. His eyes were full of despair and pleading. Please, help me, I am willing to hand over all my property to you. Karen was startled by the sudden move, and he could feel the old man's hands shaking slightly. All property, ha ha ha, I'm laughing so hard, do you mean the tattered clothes you are wearing? At this moment, a short man turned his head and interjected, his behavior was frivolous and his tone was mocking. When Karen arrived, he had already sat in a seat next to him. Even though the environment was very noisy, he still heard the story the old man told Karen. He held a glass of unnamed spirits, sat next to Karen, and said with a smile, don't be fooled by him. He is just a poor guy. He will basically tell this story to everyone he meets, just for the sake of it. Deceiving you outsiders. Karen raised his head and glanced at the short man in front of him, and said calmly, oh, you know him. I know him. He is a famous person in our town. His name is Rodrick. The short man seemed familiar. He sat beside Karen and said slowly, as I just said, he was a poor man. In fact, he was not poor until he learned to gamble. You know, sir, once you get into gambling, you can easily become poor and less human. Karen nodded, indicating that he very much agreed with this statement. Indeed, gambling is not terrible, the terrible thing is lack of self-control. Yes, you are absolutely right. In fact, I also gamble occasionally, but I only regard it as a kind of entertainment, not as a means of making a living like him. The short man said this. Very proud, with contempt for gamblers in his tone. This is a good thing. It seems that this guy is very sensible. However, Karen remembered a saying he heard in his previous life. Betting does not matter how big or small, gambling is gambling. If you win, you want to win. If you lose, you want to make a comeback. Gambling once you have S**X, you don't care about anything else. Is it because of gambling? Yes, sir, I don't know the first half of the story he told, but the rest is entirely because of himself that Delica became like this. Advertisement. He lost Delica to the owner of this bar. Karen guessed. If this is the case, this old man really does not deserve sympathy. The short man nodded and explained. Not only that, he also lost everything he owned. I still remember that bet. Even Marine was attracted, and they even became the public announcer of the bet. Quote. When Rodrick heard the word Marine, he pointed at the short man's nose and cursed. What do you know? I didn't lose because they cheated. Marine is Donahue's man. Donahue knows Marine. This is the set they made for me. If I can win, I will definitely win. Really? Is it their fault that you gambled? The short man remained unmoved and mocked. Rodrick was stunned and speechless. After a long time, he suddenly said, yes, it's their fault. The short man sneered and ignored Rodrick, as if he felt that Rodrick was hopeless. Rodrick stared at Karen, his face turned red because of the wine grandmaster. I remember, the first time I gambled was because of Marine, and I won a lot at that time. He choked up and continued. I thought I would keep winning, but I lost, miserably. Marine has a bad reputation here. Karen interrupted Rodrick and suddenly asked an irrelevant question. The short man thought for a while, glanced around, lowered his voice and said in a deep voice, this is indeed not very good. They often come to this town to cause trouble and charge high protection fees. Furthermore, facing the pirates, he has no marine responsibilities at all and has done nothing. Protection fee. Karen frowned and asked, isn't this town a member country? Why not? Just because they are. These marines are still restrained and won't go too far. The short man whispered. Since it is a franchised country, why does Marine still charge protection fees? There's no way. Who asked me to be a Marine? If I don't pay, they won't come over to clean up the pirates. The short man sighed repeatedly. Didn't you say they did nothing when facing the pirates? Karen noticed that the short man's words were inconsistent. The short man smiled awkwardly. It's not that we haven't done anything at all. We occasionally come to clean up pirates who cause trouble, but after cleaning up, they often ask for more expensive protection fees. Advertisement. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. Rodrick suddenly laughed at the side, and tears fell from his laughter. You have all been deceived by Marine. In fact, those pirates were called here by Marine. I have seen Joe with my own eyes. D paid the pirates. Hey, please keep your voice down, the short man was startled. He looked around, and when he saw that no one was paying attention, he slowly exhaled. Fortunately, no one is paying attention, otherwise I would be killed by you. Quote. With that said, The short man quickly stood up and left, for fear of getting into trouble because of Roderick's words. Who is Jody? Karen asked. It's Colonel Marine here. Rodrick explained to Karen calmly as if he didn't notice the short man's movements. Are you sure you've seen him pay money to pirates? I'm sure, and I've figured out a lot of things. It's precisely because of seeing this that Marine asked me to gamble and got me addicted to gambling, because no one would believe what a gambler says. Rodrick's eyes became sharp, as if he was about to spit out fire. Marine pays money to pirates. Karen mused. If the Marine here is really like what he said, that would be too much. He will not allow Marine to appear as such a black sheep. What's the relationship between the boss here and Jody? They're cousins. Then you still dare to bet with him? Karen looked at Roderick speechlessly. Roderick said bitterly. I won too much at that time. By the time I came to my senses, it was already too late. Karen thought for a moment and said slowly, okay, I will help you. What? Roderick looked in disbelief and rubbed his ears. I'll help you, Karen repeated, her tone flat. Roderick couldn't hold back the smile on his face. He grinned. Then what should we do now? Karen showed a mysterious smile on her face and said lightly. Bet. Chapter 63. I really like it. Advertisement. You want to bet with Donahue? Roderick looked at Karen in surprise and said suspiciously, you don't seem to be a gambler. I'm not. Karen nodded and responded nonchalantly. Oh, forget it. Roderick stood up and prepared to leave. Don't you want to rescue Delica? Karen said lightly. I want to, but I don't want to let irrelevant people get into the quagmire. When he said this, he had a smile on his face. But you seem to be planning to do this just now. Karen was referring to the time when Roderick came over to ask for help. Roderick stared into Karen's eyes and smiled calmly. I'm not going to do that now. So what are you going to do now? Karen asked. I don't know, maybe I will seek Marine's help. Roderick shrugged and said bitterly. Karen stood up and said calmly, first a Marine. Without waiting for Roderick to question, Karen continued. Just now, a warship from the Marine headquarters docked at the port of Sundai Island. Introduction. I am the Supreme Commander of that warship, Karen. ... Bang. A series of sounds of shattering bottles broke the din of Shark's night. What's going on? Someone is making trouble. Haha, it's a good show. Delica's singing stopped smoothly, and then a familiar figure appeared in front of her. It was Roderick. Donahue on the side shook his neck and frowned. Roderick. Roderick seemed drunk, his face flushed, and he muttered, it's me. Donahue narrowed his eyes and said calmly, do you want to cause trouble? Making trouble? I didn't. I just didn't hold my hand steady and the bottle fell to the ground. Roderick raised his head, poured another gulp of wine into his mouth, and burped. Delica opened her mouth in the water tank, but finally said nothing. Really? Donahue winked at the boys next to him and said with a smile, Roderick is drunk, take him home. Then several strong men with naked upper bodies came to Roderick's side, lifting his shoulders and trying to lift him out. Advertisement. Roderick shouted, wait, I'm not drunk. Several strong men ignored him, grabbing him by the collar and trying to drag him out. At this moment, a strong hand grabbed the wrist of one of the strong men. The strong man struggled hard, but he couldn't shake it at all. He turned around and saw a blond boy looking at him with a smile on his face. Let go. The strong man shouted angrily, stretched out his right hand, and hit Karen's cheek hard. The smile on Karen's face did not diminish. With a strong left hand, the strong man who was about to attack Karen flew sideways. Boom. The strong man's face made close contact with the floor of the bar. When several other strong men saw this scene, they let go of Roderick's hand and surrounded Karen, staring at him with eager eyes. Karen remained unmoved and leaned down to pull Roderick up. The moment Karen leaned over, several strong men looked at each other and took out flintlock guns from their arms. Without hesitation, dense bullets enveloped Karen's back. Bang bang bang. The sound of bullets hitting steel was endless. Karen picked up a bullet casing on the ground, stood up, and threw it away, causing a big hole to break in the wall next to him. He used armed color entanglement. Such a shocking and horrifying scene left several strong men stunned in place, with cold sweat sliding down their cheeks unconsciously. There was silence in the whole place, and the guests in the bar opened their mouths and looked at the cracked wall. Pa bang bang. A series of applause broke the tranquility. Donahue walked to Karen with 2 glasses of wine and praised. Awesome, awesome, I didn't expect there to be such a master in this small bar like mine. As he said that, he handed one of the drinks to Karen and said with a smile. Let me know, I am the owner of this bar, Donahue. You can also call me Shark. Karen did not accept the drink handed over by Donahue and responded calmly. Karen. Advertisement. Donahue didn't care, waved his hand, and handed the wine glass in his hand to the bartender who came over. That's right, I don't mean any harm, it's just that my men are a little reckless. You know, running a bar always requires some people who don't look easy to mess with as a guarantee. Otherwise, some gangsters would come here every day to cause trouble. Oh, I'm not talking about you. Of course, it's not my friend Mr. Roderick either. Karen glanced at Roderick. Are you his friend? Yes, Mr. Cullen. But he didn't think so. I know he has some misunderstandings about me, but I will always be his friend, always will be. With that said, Donahue walked to Roderick's side and supported his shaky other half. I heard that you won Miss Delica from Rodrick. Karen said suddenly. Yes, sir. In fact, I persuaded him not to do it, but I couldn't get him to do it. You know, once a gambler gets involved, he will ignore it. I feel bad when this happens. Quote. Donahue recalled what happened that day, with a helpless expression on his face. It seemed like he was really sad for Roderick. Actually, I'm also a gambler. Karen stared at Donahue and said slowly. Really, but you don't look like it. Donahue said in surprise. This was the second time Karen heard someone say that he didn't look like a gambler. Could it be that there was some kind of aura among gamblers? Karen took out a golden box from his arms and opened it. Inside was Karen treasures looted from the Fang Pirates. He didn't know how much Bailey these were worth, but they should be worth a lot of money. Karen threw the golden box to Donahue and chuckled. These are my assets. After a pause, he winked at Delica, whistled, and said flirtatiously, you know, men are lustful, let alone a mermaid, so I want to bet her with you. Donahue understood instantly and sneered in his heart, I think you are a fake gambler and a real pervert. He took the golden box handed over by Karen, took a look at an orb inside under the light, and said with some embarrassment. These treasures of yours are worth almost 20 million belly, but this is not enough. As you said, sir, she is not only a beauty, but also a mermaid, and a mermaid with a beautiful voice. In my opinion, Miss Delica's family is at least 100 million belly. Karen sat at the bar, slapping the table with his palms irritably. What? 100 million belly? But this is already my entire net worth. I really like Miss Delica. Chapter 64 Lady Luck is smiling. Advertisement. Donahue rolled his eyes, put Roderick on the empty seat aside, and suggested, perhaps, you can use these treasures to win several times from me first. Karen's eyes lit up. He grabbed Donahue's hand and said excitedly, yes, you are right, why didn't I think of it? As he spoke, he grabbed Donahue's hand harder, causing Donahue's expression to twist. It hurts me to death. Karen quickly let go of his hands and said sheepishly, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it. Donahue rubbed his sore hands, his angry expression swept away, and he smiled bitterly, you are really strong. Ha ha ha, I am a pirate hunter, my strength is the guarantee of my food. Karen smiled awkwardly, and then asked impatiently, do you know where there is a casino? Donahue's eyes were full of smiles. Of course, I am here. As he spoke, he pointed to an iron gate next to him. The smile on Karen's face became even thicker. He imitated a certain celebrity and shouted excitedly. Back then, Chen Daozai could win 37 million with 20 yuan, and I, Karen, could win Delica with 20 million. It was not a problem. Although Donahue didn't know who Chen Daozai was, he saw the certainty of Karen's words and secretly noted the name in his mind. What a spirit. A beauty and a hero. I believe Miss Delica will also like a hero with spirit like you. Unfortunately, I am a gambler now. Karen felt funny in her heart, but maintained an excited expression on the outside. Okay, let's start now. I can't wait. Karen originally thought that the casino in this kind of bar would not be very big, but as soon as he entered the place, he realized that he was wrong, how wrong he was. He was shocked by the sight in front of him. The lights are flashing, the noise is coming and going, the gambling tables are spacious and neatly arranged, and they are filled with various gambling equipment. People crowded together, expressions of excitement and concentration. The dealers are skillful, and the chips are flying in their hands, like a gorgeous magic show. There is also a special fragrance permeating the air, giving people a very comfortable feeling. He and Donahue attracted a lot of attention when they first came in. Of course, the main attention was on Donahue. Boss. Advertisement. A waiter next to him held a thick stack of chips in his hand. Well, prepare 20 million chips to give to Mr. Cullen. Donahue said calmly. Yes, boss. The waiter nodded, handed out 20 million, and followed the two of them. Mr. Cullen, what kind of games do you usually play? Donahue introduced with a smile. The most popular games we play here are baccarat, dice, blackjack, roulette, and poker. That's what you like to play. What kind of game? Karen didn't know what to choose for a while, because Karen had never played any of the things he was talking about. Is there any landlord fight? Karen asked casually. This is the only type of gambling he is exposed to. What is that? Donahue thought for a long time and still didn't understand how landlords was played. It's nothing. Karen smiled. He missed the friends who played landlords with him. Unfortunately, he would never see them again. Oh, then let me introduce these games to you. Donahue led Karen and began to introduce him to the various projects in the casino. At first, Karen listened with great interest, but later he was so excited that he yawned again and again. Walking to a big disc again, Karen stopped Donahue, who was still introducing. Wait, no need to introduce, do you have a simpler game project here? Donahue stopped, looked at Karen's tired face, and smiled. Yes, let's play dice. When Karen heard about this project, her eyes lit up. The rules for playing dice are very simple. One person has 3 dice and compares the size. Okay, let's play with this. Donahue brought Karen to an empty table, ordered his men to clean the table, and sat across from Karen. Please. Karen took off the hidden front from behind, placed it on the table, and sat down casually. Donahue's eyes lit up when he saw Zhang Feng, and he praised, "What a great sword. If I'm not mistaken, this is a famous sword." Karen nodded, pulled out the hidden sword, held the hilt of the sword in his hand, pointed the sword tip at Donahue, and deliberately showed off, "This is a good and sharp sword with 50 skills. There are only 50 in this world, and this is one of them." Quote. Being pointed at by Zhang Feng, Donahue's expression was not very good. He squeezed out a stiff smile and praised, "Just such a famous sword should be worth tens of millions of belly." Karen sheathed the hidden blade and said calmly, "Maybe." Advertisement. Then he looked extremely excited and geared up. "Let's get started. Okay, let's play with the simplest rules. These are 2 dice cups, one for each of us. Whoever rolls out a higher total number of points wins." Donahue shook one of the dice cups, and the crisp sound reached Karen's ears. Karen nodded and smiled. "It's a very simple rule." Donahue suggested. "Well, let's take it 1 million at a time. Of course, you can increase it if you think it's too little." "Okay, let's do this for now." So, Karen randomly threw a chip representing 1 million from the card table, picked up the dice cup and shook it a few times. "Okay, it's your turn." Donahue also threw out the chips, shook the dice cup a few times, and said with a smile, "Let's go." The two of them opened the dice cup together. Karen's is 2, 3, 6. Donahue is 6, 4, 4. Donahue wins. "What bad luck," Karen muttered, took out another chip, and shook the dice cup randomly. Donahue took back the chips on the card table and said with a smile, "This is a game of luck. It seems that I was very lucky." Then he also started shaking the dice cup. When the two stopped moving, Karen took the lead in opening his dice cup. 5, 2, 1. Karen sighed at the number he rolled out. At this moment, Karen heard the dice in Donahue's dice cup that had stopped moving. Although the voice was very low, it was still heard by Karen, who had awakened his domineering power. It turned out that this was his method of cheating. Is this starting to cost a fortune? It's a bit too impatient, Karen sneered in her heart. Donahue opened his dice cup. 1, 1, 3. It seems that my luck is not that good this time. Donahue shook his head helplessly. Haha, as expected of a casino worker, he also knows how to play the long game to catch the big fish, but he doesn't know who is the fish. Karen looked at this scene with a cheeky smile. Ha ha ha, you can win at such a young age. It seems like Lady Luck is on my side today. Chapter 65,666. Advertisement. Time passed little by little, and the crisp sound of the dice shaking continued. Karen has more and more chips around him, and his luck seems to be really good. According to a rough estimate, the amount has increased from the original 20 million to more than 60 million. His expression also changed from dull to extremely excited, a kind of excitement that belongs to a gambler. No wonder so many people are addicted to gambling. This feeling can really make people get addicted, especially when they win money. However, I think it's time to close the net. Karen kept the excited expression on his face unchanged. He held a large wad of chips and muttered. You are right. It seems that your luck today is not very good. Of course, maybe it is because I am so lucky, ha ha ha. Karen laughed wildly, feeling proud of himself. He casually grabbed a handful of chips and threw them into the hands of a waiter next to him. He looked like a nouveau riche. Donahue was also laughing. Although he was smiling bitterly, Karen could tell that he was smiling happily. That's how casino operators are. He was never afraid that you would win, just afraid that you wouldn't play. Mr. Cullen's luck is really good. It seems that I am not suitable for gambling today. I'm sorry. With that said, Donahue stood up and was about to leave. No, you run a casino. You don't have this little money, do you? I'm still a little short of 100 million belly. How about you play with me for a while? Karen slumped on the chair in disappointment. And aren't we friends? Can you bear to let your friends down? Donahue turned his back to Karen, with a sneer on his lips. When he turned around, his face instantly changed to a trace of hesitation, and he gritted his teeth. Okay, since Mr. Cullen regards me as a friend, then I have no choice but to risk my life to accompany you. Then he paused and looked confused. However, I think this gamble is too slow. How about we speed up the progress? Bar. Okay. Karen's eyes lit up and he agreed without hesitation. How much are you going to add? Donahue sighed and said in a deep voice, 10 million times. Well, the chips directly increased 10 times. It seems that he is ready to harvest. Anyway, I also feel a little tired. The smell here is really uncomfortable. Karen stood up suddenly, walked quickly to Donahue, and he shook hands and said excitedly. As expected of my good brother, but I think it's still too slow. Let's do this. I'll bet all my property on you, Miss Delica. Donahue hurriedly took out his hand, fearing that Karen would use too much force and hurt his hand. His right hand was still aching. Advertisement. Haha, isn't it too big to play like this? And you only have 60 million now, which is still not enough. Then just 2, just right. I will win 60 million first, and then win Miss Delica, and finally I will have 120 million left. Karen imagined winning 2 in a row, and wiped her mouth with her hand. Sighed saliva. Alas, why is it so tiring to play a fool? I will never act again next time. Karen wiped the saliva from her hand on Donahue's clothes calmly. A trace of anger flashed in Donahue's eyes, and he said stiffly, "Let's do this, Brother Cullen, just one handful." "But I only have 60 million. Karen scratched the back of his head, and then seemed to think of something. "Do you want my famous sword?" "Of course not, I want you." As a qualified businessman, Donahue understands that getting Karen is equivalent to getting a super master with the blessing of a famous sword, and with a master, maybe he no longer has to look at other people's eyes. Karen calmly took a few steps away from Donahue and looked at him warily. She originally thought that his purpose was to hide his sword, but he didn't expect that he was actually coming for me. "Well, Brother Cullen, you also know that I run a bar and casino. In this kind of business, it is inevitable that I will encounter people who make trouble. If it is an ordinary person, forget it, but when you meet masters like Brother Cullen, a small shop will be very troublesome. It's hard to resist." As he said that, a few tears fell from Donahue's eyes. It didn't look fake. He seemed to have been really sad these past few years. So, the store has always wanted to recruit some real masters like the Cullen brothers. He stared intensely into Karen's eyes. "So that's it." Karen exhaled and said distressedly, "But I am still planning to take Miss Delica around the world." He looked embarrassed, as if he had already won Miss Delica, without even considering that he would lose. Donahue's mouth twitched slightly, and he smiled bitterly and said, "Let's see, one game determines the outcome. If you win, you take 60 million and leave with Delica. If you lose, I will give you your 20 million intact, Delica. Miss Lika, you are free to pursue her, I only want you to serve me for 5 years." Karen was stunned. He was really stunned. He didn't expect Donahue to be so courageous. Of course, in Donahue's heart, this was a bet that he was destined to win. Advertisement. "Okay, you are really my good brother. When Delica and I travel around the world, I will definitely remember you." Karen looked excited, and he returned to his seat with an excited expression. Donahue also returned to his seat, and they both picked up the dice cup on the table and started shaking it, but this time it was not as easy as before. Boom, bang, bang. The dice cup was covered on the table and made a dull sound. Donahue smiled and gestured to Karen to open it first. "Do you think I'm stupid? Whoever doesn't know who opens first will lose. I'm a man who has watched a lot of gambling movies. You still want to trick me? It's ridiculous." Karen shook his head and motioned for Donahue to open first. Donahue didn't know what Karen was thinking, and he didn't care when Karen asked him to drive first. Nodding slightly, he removed the dice cup covering the table. 6, 6, 6. Karen squinted his eyes slightly. Although Donahue's movements were very small, he still saw Donahue's little finger pressing gently when opening the poison. The number he gave is undoubtedly the maximum value. If there are no accidents. The audience burst into fierce applause. "It seems I won." Donahue smiled. "Really?" Karen's excited expression gradually cooled down. "That's how casinos are. Sometimes you have bad luck, but it doesn't matter, as long as you win the crucial game." Donahue sighed, stretched out his hand, and the waiter on the side handed him a cigar and helped him light it. "What if some people can always win?" Karen showed a mysterious smile and slowly moved the dice cup away. There was silence in the audience, and then a burst of more intense applause broke out. 6, 6, 6, 1, 1, 1. Chapter 66 Waiting. Advertisement. "It seems I won." Karen stretched out his hand, but the waiter on the side was unmoved. He had no choice but to take out a cigarette from his arms, lit it himself, and puffed out a cloud of white smoke from his mouth. Pa bang bang. Donahue sat in his chair and applauded. "Wonderful, I underestimated you." The waiter on the side held the chips and announced loudly, "Mr. Cullen's dice is damaged and does not count. The point is 0. Mr. Donahue wins." Donahue said nothing, he stared directly at Karen. Karen put out the cigarette he had just lit and muttered to himself, "It seems that the god of gamblers, trick doesn't work well in casinos." Looking up again, he suddenly smiled. "Is that so, Mr. Donahue?" Silence. Donahue stretched out his fingers and tapped on the table. After a long time, he said gloomily, "Take your 20 million and leave, as if you never came today." Boom. Before he finished speaking, a sharp sword energy floated past him and landed on the wall of the casino, leaving a large hole that was transparent to light. "Sorry, the wind was too strong and I couldn't hear you clearly." Karen gently stroked the Tibetan fung in his hand and said calmly, "Colonel Marine is my cousin." Donahue was no longer as calm as before. He took a few shuddering puffs of his cigar, only to find that only half of the cigar he had just lit was left. "Which one are you talking about? Karen himself is also a Marine colonel. Jody, you can call him here and I'll talk to him personally." There was another brief silence, and then under Karen's calm eyes, Donahue understood many things. Okay. Donahue knew he had no choice. He gritted his teeth, took out a phone bug from his arms, and called him. Donahue. What do you want from me? Have you found a good one? A wretched voice came from the phone bug. If you want me to say, don't use Delica to make money at all, send her to me, let her I enjoy it. No, someone wants to take Delica away. Donahue wiped the sweat from his face. Is it that B************** D Rodrick again? I told you a long time ago, throw him out to feed the dogs, he knows our secret. Jody. Donahue quickly stopped Jody, who was about to continue speaking. It's not Rodrick who wants to take Delica away, he is right in front of me. What? Well, who is he? Advertisement. A pirate hunter. So Donahue told Jody on the other end of the phone all about Karen's origins and what happened. Well, okay, I understand, I'll be there soon. Gaba. The phone caller was hung up. Donahue took back the phone bug in his hand and gave Karen a stiff smile. He'll be there soon. Well, very good, let's go out first, the smell here is really bad. Karen stretched, put Zhang Feng back on his back, and said calmly, remember to have my money ready. Yes. So Karen and Donahue left the casino together and returned to the Shark Night. Unlike when the two entered the casino, Donahue's attitude had changed significantly. Originally, he thought Karen was just a ferocious wolf, but now he discovered that Karen turned out to be a tiger. Delica's singing is still echoing, her voice is clear and graceful, and there is a touch of sadness in the tune. Rodrick didn't know when he woke up. He was sitting at the bar, watching Delica in a daze. What are you thinking about? Karen found a chair and sat next to Rodrick. Rodrick saw Karen coming out and said excitedly, how is it? Of course there's no problem. Karen patted Rodrick on the shoulder, and then ordered a glass of the special drink here. Thank you. Rodrick stood up and bowed deeply to Karen. I said, as long as what you said is true, I will consider your report as meritorious. I promise. Very good. Then are we going to pick up Delica now? Karen held down the excited Rodrick and said calmly, no, it still needs a little time, I have to wait for Jody. Okay. Rodrick gradually stopped shaking his body and sat down again. Where are you from? I said it was before you met Delica. Karen asked casually. Rodrick thought for a while, and his eyes were full of reminiscence. West Blue. I heard it's a mess there. Advertisement. Yes, sir, but where in this world can we be considered truly safe? What do you think caused this kind of chaos? I don't know, maybe it's a pirate, maybe it's a marine, maybe it's just the way this world is. 2. Then, neither of them spoke, just waiting quietly. The door of the bar was slowly pushed open. Donahue and Rodrick looked up at the door at the same time. Karen poured a glass of wine into his mouth and smacked his lips. I shouldn't say it, but the wine here is really good. Seeing no response from the two of them, he asked casually, is Jody here? No, it's a beauty. Karen turned around and looked towards the door, then fell into a daze, because they knew the beauty Karen knew. She is tall, wearing a pink suspender short-sleeved upper body, and a pair of close-fitting hot pants on the lower body. The exquisite tailoring perfectly outlines her figure curves. Under the hot pants, a pair of long white legs are fully exposed, and there are a spooky spider tattoo. As soon as Guion entered the Shark Night, she attracted the attention of everyone. She wrinkled her small nose slightly, looked around, her eyes lit up, and she quickly walked towards Karen. You are indeed here. Karen asked for another special drink from the bar and asked with a smile, why are you here? Guion snatched the special tune from Karen's hand and asked, is this the investigation you are talking about? Karen shook his head helplessly. Of course, it's a mixed bag here. Don't you know that the bar is the real intelligence center? HMPH, you can tell, so your investigation has yielded results. Guion glared at Karen and drank down the drink in his hand. That's mine. Karen stretched out his hand, then slowly put it down. Forget it. Where's Yuta? I took her shopping for a while. She was a little sleepy, so I put her on the warship. Guion explained, then threw the empty cup in his hand to Karen and said lightly, the wine is not bad. Well, let's have another special drink. Karen handed the empty glass to the bartender. You haven't answered me yet. Guion asked angrily. That's right, but you have to wait for a while. Karen turned his attention to Delica, who was singing. Guion moved his body to block Karen's sight and asked. What are you waiting for? A marine? Karen thought for a moment and continued. Maybe it's a pirate. Chapter 67 Pirates. Advertisement. Two completely opposite answers came out of Karen's mouth. Guion thought for a while and did not continue to ask. Instead, he took the special concoction handed to Karen by the bartender, found a chair somewhere, and leaned against Karen. Sat down. Her two arms were pressed against the table, one hand was holding a wine glass, and the other was holding her chin, looking very seductive in the dim light. She's beautiful. A lazy voice came out of Guion's mouth suddenly. Good. Karen didn't know why, but felt a little guilty. She's just beautiful. Guion rolled his eyes at Karen, pointed at Delica, and said with a smile, and the singing is also very nice, at least much better than someone else's. What's the word? I think I can sing pretty well. Of course, it's not as good as Delica, but at least it's probably not unpleasant. Karen smiled awkwardly, not knowing how to answer, and echoed. Good. Do you like her? Not yet. No, she is Roderick's daughter. Karen swallowed and pointed to Roderick next to her. Guillaume glanced at Roderick in surprise and said slowly, it doesn't look like it. So Karen told Guillaume the story of Roderick and Delica. She's so pathetic. Guillaume looked at Delica with pity, and then glared at Roderick. It's really pathetic to have such a father. Roderick lowered his head, not daring to look into Guillaume's eyes. Karen naturally didn't speak. Although there were reasons for Marine and Donahue, if Roderick hadn't drunkenly forced Delica to turn into a mermaid, she wouldn't have been targeted by the bad guys, let alone the subsequent gambling incident. At the same time, on the other side, after Jody hung up the phone with Donahue, he was not in a hurry to go to the Shark Bar. He could get the Colonel in this place. You can say that he is bad, but he is not stupid. He could feel that the pirate hunter named Karen was confident, so he needed to investigate Karen's identity and background. Like Karen, he was waiting. Colonel, we found it. A soldier wearing a Marine uniform shouted hurriedly. Jody stood up from his office chair and asked hurriedly, how is it? As the Colonel guessed, there is no pirate hunter named Karen in the East China Sea, at least not a famous one. Advertisement. Sure enough, he is not a pirate hunter. Did you find any useful information? Yes, a Marine warship was docked at the port of Sundai Island this morning. I found out that the commander inside is named Karen. With that said, the Marine soldier handed the found information to Jody. Jody took it and took a look. It was a sketch. The sketch was exactly what Karen looked like. It also clearly recorded Karen's basic information and itinerary. Marine Headquarters Colonel, Karen. Jody frowned slightly as he looked at Karen in the portrait, feeling a little suspicious. Could such a young colonel be the child of a big shot in the headquarters? This is not easy to handle. He would rather meet the mature lieutenant general of the headquarters than the immature colonel of the Marine headquarters, because most of them have just entered the officialdom and have not experienced the training of society. At this age, they have the greatest sense of justice. He rubbed his head. Since the other party was specifically looking for trouble, a cold light flashed in his eyes and he secretly made a decision. He waved his hand and signaled the soldiers to leave first. Then find a secret mezzanine under the desk and take out a special phone bug from it. Boom. The door of Shark Night was kicked open, and several guys dressed as pirates walked in from the bar door in a swaggering manner. The pirates are coming. Damn, why are they here again? Hurry up and call Marine to come over for support. As the pirates entered the door, the lively atmosphere of the bar gradually cooled down. The guests drinking in the bar were discussing in low voices one by one, most of them sober. The leader of the pirates is tall and burly, with tight muscles, exuding powerful strength. His face is covered with ferocious scars, like the mark of a devil, and his eyes reveal ferocity and cruelty. As soon as he stepped into this bar, the leader of the pirates shouted loudly, "Who is the boss here? Here he comes, he is indeed a pirate." A flash of light flashed in Karen's eyes, and he was very happy. Guillaume didn't have any other reaction, he just looked at the pirate who appeared at the door curiously. Is it them? Karen asked. Yes, I have seen the pirate leader. He often comes to this island to rob property and sometimes kidnap people. Roderick opened his eyes wide and recognized it carefully. Then, he suddenly walked to the bounty wall next to him, took off a bounty card, and handed it to Karen's hand. Miles, bounty, 43 million. Advertisement. No wonder he is so arrogant. If calculated based on the bounty, the pirate in front of him is considered quite powerful in the East China Sea. Donahue, who was standing next to Karen, seemed to have seen the reinforcements appear, and his expression was extremely excited. However, when he saw Karen holding the bounty with great interest to compare it with the pirates in front of him, he suddenly lost his mind. Could it be that this doesn't scare him? Cold sweat fell from Donahue's forehead, and he asked Karen what he wanted to do with his eyes. Oh, don't be nervous, don't you know them? Karen shook the wine glass in her hand and chuckled. No, I don't know. Naturally, Donahue would not admit it. He wiped the sweat from his face and asked. What do I do? Karen smiled, suddenly raised his hand, and said loudly, Hey, it's over here. Then he pointed at Donahue and continued, He is the boss here. Karen's location instantly became the focus of everyone's attention. Miles walked up to Karen very arrogantly. When he saw Guillaume sitting at the bar, his eyes lit up. Then he breathed into his hands, combed his messy hair, and said with a smile. Hey, beauty, will you feel lonely if you come to the bar alone? Let me. Before he finished speaking, he felt a sharp gaze scanning his back. This gaze made him shiver all over. He turned around stiffly and looked at Karen, who was drinking, with some doubts in his eyes. Boy, were you looking at me just now? Karen yawned and said calmly. She's not alone. Miles stared into Karen's eyes, and then gave Donahue a subtle wink. Donahue nodded imperceptibly. Hey, your actions are too obvious, you are not afraid of me being a human at all. All these little actions fell into Karen's eyes, making him feel funny. Why are you laughing? Miles stared at Karen with doubts in his eyes. Karen stretched his body, stood up from his seat, and said with a smile. Nothing, I just thought of something funny. Chapter 68 Marine. Advertisement. Miles. Karen looked at the reward order in his hand. In the picture, Miles was standing in front of a burning house. From the background, he could vaguely see several people dressed as pirates behind him, and there were some villagers on the ground. Corpse. The picture is very clear. I don't know if it was taken by the Morgan's newspaper or by the photo department of Marine headquarters. Miles took the bounty from Karen into his own hands and smiled. Ha ha ha, it's me. Look how handsome they made me look. Miles is laughing in the picture. It can be seen that he was really happy at that time. Really, but someone was photographed very ugly. Karen pointed to the body lying on the ground in the picture, and the smile on his face gradually faded. It is their honor to be on camera with me, and I think they will be very happy too. Miles laughed to himself. I think they will be happier soon. Karen could no longer suppress his emotions. He suddenly took action and threw the laughing Miles to the wall aside. Hung. The huge figure hit the hard wall, leaving a human-shaped crack in the wall instantly. When the pirates who followed Miles saw that their boss was thrown out, they quickly took out their flintlock guns and pointed them at Karen. This is a flintlock gun they imported from North Blue. It is not only accurate, but also more powerful than ordinary flintlock guns. Just as they were about to pull the trigger, a figure passed in front of their eyes. They felt their wrists were hit by something, and then the flintlock in their hands fell to the ground. The next moment, they finally saw clearly that there was another person in front of them. Bang, bang, bang. The dull crashing sound resounded throughout the bar, making people feel shocked. They were kicked toward the wall of the bar one by Karen. With Karen deliberately controlling his strength, they did not pass through the wall, but after hitting the wall, they fell high and passed out. To deal with these people, he didn't even want to use Zhang Feng because they were not worthy. After the noise, the already quiet bar became even quieter. The guests present were stunned and opened their mouths as wide as if they could stuff an egg. The whole bar fell into a strange silence, with only the reverberation of the loud noise echoing in the air. After a long silence, these people clapped violently, cheering and shouting for Karen. So handsome, who is this man? Advertisement. I remember he was also the one who made trouble in the bar just now. He was taken away by the boss later. I didn't expect him to come back again. Yes, I also saw it. This guy can cut the wall apart with one sword. I know him, he is my friend. The person who said this was the short man who had been drinking with Karen and Rodrick just now. His face was excited, his eyes were shining, there was uncontrollable excitement on his face, and there was a hint of pride in his smile. Dong dong dong. At this moment, a heavy footsteps came from the crack in the human figure, followed by a heavy hand. Miles held the wall with one hand, wiped the blood spilled from the corner of his mouth with the other, and walked towards Karen step by step. As he got closer and closer, everyone who had been discussing just now stopped talking and watched the subsequent developments quietly. Damn you kid, you attacked me unexpectedly. Lousy is a pirate with a bounty of 43 million. Karen dug his ears and didn't understand why the pirates he met said the same thing every time. You are not a pirate, so I won't cause trouble for you. Damn it, savage cannon. Miles walked faster and faster, like a cannonball being fired, hitting Karen hard. Karen didn't care, and casually stretched out his right hand to touch the head of Miles who was running towards him. Then with a fierce force, Miles' head was pressed to the ground. With a boom, a huge hole opened in the ground, and the terrifying impact caused a cloud of dust to fly. How is it possible? How can I lose? Regardless of the pain in his body, Miles struggled to stand up. Seeing this, Karen raised his foot and stepped on Miles' face, preventing him from moving at all. Karen bent down, picked up the flintlock gun on the ground, played with it in his hand, then pointed it at Donahue and said with a smile. Is this the pirate Jody is looking for? It's not that bad. Donahue stood up stiffly and stammered when he spoke. No, I don't know him, and Jody probably doesn't know him either. He knew that if Karen knew that Jody was colluding with the pirates, he would not survive. Really? Just ask if you recognize him. Karen was noncommittal, removed his foot from Miles' face, squatted down, and said slowly. Tell me, what's your relationship with Jody? Advertisement. Donahue stared closely at Miles, fearing that he would reveal what happened between him and Jody. To Karen's surprise, Miles turned out to be surprisingly tough. Bah, what Jody? I don't know. Hung. Karen shot Miles in the thigh, and Miles screamed, but did not change his words at all. It doesn't matter if you don't know him. You should remember it by the time we get to the interrogation room. At this moment, a series of footsteps suddenly appeared at the door. The bar door was opened again, and a group of people wearing Marine uniforms slowly entered through the door. The leader Marine glanced at Miles on the ground, and his face was a little ugly. He originally thought that Karen was just a Marine who was promoted based on his background and would not be too strong, so he sent Miles to silence him. Unexpectedly, Miles such a waste. Jody adjusted his expression, quickly walked to Karen, and said respectfully, Hello, First Colonel Marine, Jody. Although he and Karen are both colonels, Karen is the colonel of the Marine headquarters, and he is the colonel of the branch. The headquarters is 3 levels higher than the branch. Donahue had already guessed Karen's identity, but he didn't expect that Karen's position would be higher than Jodi's. The timing is quite accurate. Karen said nonchalantly. No, I was busy with military affairs, so I came too late. Jodi was serious and stood straight. Do you know this person? Karen pointed to Max on the ground. I know. I read the bounty notices every day. His name is Max, and he has a bounty of 43 million. He often harasses the nearby waters. I have never dreamed of bringing him to justice. Fortunately, I met the master today. The master is for us in Barren Bay. You have solved a serious problem. I sincerely thank you. As he spoke, Jodi stretched out his hand to shake Karen's hand. Karen was unmoved and said calmly, really? It's okay. I'll find out after I finish the interrogation. Jodi looked embarrassed. This is against the rules. Although he was captured by you, this is the town of Barren Bay. We are both colonels. Logically speaking, he should be handed over to the local area for interrogation. Of course, I won't take away your credit. When the time comes, write the report as you want. This was Jodi's last resort. He knew that as long as Miles was handed over to Karen, Miles would not necessarily help him keep the secret. He could only rely on bullying to snatch Miles into his own hands. Oh, it seems that my level is not enough. But who told you that there is only a colonel here? Chapter 69 Fishing Law Enforcement. Advertisement. Ah, isn't Colonel Cullen the Supreme Commander here? Jodi asked doubtfully. He had investigated the warship anchored in the port and found that the Supreme Commander of that warship was Cullen, a young colonel from the headquarters. The Supreme Commander is indeed me, but it does not mean that the highest position is mine. Karen pointed to Guillaume, who was drinking next to her, and pursed her lips. Let me introduce, she is the highest position here, from Marine Headquarters. Major General Guillaume. Jodi saw Guillaume at the first sight after entering the door, but he didn't take Guillaume seriously. He just thought that Guillaume was Karen's lover. He didn't expect that such a beautiful girl turned out to be a major general in the headquarters. She is a major general? Jodi asked in disbelief. At this moment, he regretted letting Miles come forward. Not only Jodi couldn't believe it, but Donahue and Rodrick also found it a bit incredible. There was no way. Although Guillaume was older than Karen, there was no difference in appearance. They could accept that young Karen was a colonel, but they couldn't accept that Guillaume was a major general. It's true. Karen pointed at Miles and said calmly, you can take him away now. No, Jodi blurted out. Huh. Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. What I mean is, can you let me see her medal? Jodi quickly explained. Of course I don't doubt you, but I can do it without a medal. Karen looked at Guillaume, who shook his head and said calmly, I don't have it with me. It's on the warship. I'll get it. Jodi's heart dropped, and he gritted his teeth. In that case, I will take Miles away. He knew that his words would offend Karen and Guillaume, but it was about his own life, so he had no choice but to take Miles away first before talking about anything else. As he spoke, he waved his hands to the soldiers next to him. Several soldiers nearby quickly helped Miles up and prepared to escort Miles out. With a swish sound and a flash of sword light, Zhang Feng appeared on Jodi's neck. What do you mean? Feeling the approach of death, Jodi looked ugly and his whole body was trembling. Karen's voice was low and his tone could not be disobeyed. I said, I will be the judge. I don't want to repeat this a second time. Advertisement. That's against the rules, Colonel Cullen. Jodi's teeth were chattering. Here, I am the rule, unless you are stronger than me. At this time, there was a rush of footsteps approaching from the bar door, and a group of people wearing Marine uniforms appeared in front of everyone. Different from the Marines brought by Jodi, this group of Marines are burly and exude a strong aura. Their military uniforms are straight, their badges are shining, and their steps are uniform. Every move shows their exquisite skills after rigorous training. This made the guests drinking at the bar very happy. This day was well worth their time. Colonel. Jesse quickly came to Karen's side and saluted. Well, good, take that pirate away. Karen nodded slightly and pointed at Miles. Yes, Colonel. Jesse ordered his men to forcefully take Miles from the hands of Marine brought by Jodi. Rodrick, take Miss Delica with you and let's go. As for the chips I won just now, Mr. Donahue, you are not unprepared. Karen grinned at Donahue. Donahue's face was stiff. He waved his hands, and several waiters appeared from the background with several safes. Get ready, there are 60 million Baileys in it, you can check it now. As expected of my good brother, he does things so neatly and neatly. Karen sighed in admiration and winked at Jesse, who took the safe from the waiter. Rodrick walked to Delica and said slowly, Delica, come back with me. Delica's face was like a calm lake, without any joy or sadness. She nodded slightly and rose from the fish tank. The moment her body left the water, a huge fish tail stretched out in the air. Advertisement. The moment the fish's tail touched the ground, it quickly split into two long, slender and white legs. The lines of the legs were graceful and smooth, and the skin was as white as pearls without a trace of blemishes. She stood there quietly, with water drops sliding down her skin like crystal pearls. Her hair was wet and clinging to her cheeks, adding a delicate beauty. The figure looks so pitiful against the backdrop of water drops, making people want to hold her in their arms and give her warmth and comfort. Even Karen was fascinated by what he saw. He had seen many teachers, but they were far inferior to the Delica in front of him. The temperament of Delica was really outstanding. Are you stunned? Gion leaned against Karen's ear and said with a smile. Karen shuddered. He quickly looked away. His desire for survival was overwhelming, and he pretended to be calm and said, "No, she is not as good looking as you, she has been immune for a long time." To be fair, Gion is indeed no worse than Delica, but Delica's current temperament is particularly pitiable. Gion chuckled lightly and did not continue to ask. Rodrick looked at Delica blankly. She was still so beautiful, but compared to the closeness before, she was a little more distant and resistant. He opened his mouth, but in the end he said nothing. He really didn't have the shame to say something intimate, let alone ask her if she was doing well. Rodrick and Delica came to Karen and followed Karen slowly toward the door. Karen walked very slowly, as if waiting for something. Donahue winked wildly at Jody. He knew that if Karen really found out something during the interrogation, he would not survive either. Jody glared at Donahue fiercely, then gritted his teeth, slowly took out a flintlock gun from his arms, pointed it at the people leaving, and pulled the trigger. Of course he would not be stupid enough to shoot at Karen. He knew that for the truly strong, guns were ineffective, so his target was Miles. Since he could not take him away, let him never say anything. Talk. There was a bang, gunshot. Jody looked ashen. He failed. Chapter 70 Don Quixote. Advertisement. Karen slowly turned around, his dark palm slowly opened, and a bullet casing slipped from his hand. Fishing law enforcement is really good. Karen's mouth curved into a big smile. Colonel, what does this mean? Even if you really want to execute him, you have to wait until I finish interrogating him. Karen patted Miles on the shoulder, like a demon whispering, and said bewitchingly, "It seems that someone doesn't want you to leave here alive." Miles stared, turned to stare at Jody, then looked at the bullet casing at Karen's feet, and he began to yell, "I'll report it, I'll report it." Jody's face became even more ugly. Donahue, who was standing next to him, even had weak legs and sat down on the ground. Report for what? Karen asked, pretending to be curious. It's Jody, it was Jody who asked me to come. Miles felt that his life was threatened, and at this moment he no longer concealed it. You are a pirate and he is a marine. Why did he ask you to come here? Don't accuse a good person unjustly. Karen defends Jody. It's true. Over the years, I have been cooperating with Jody. He told me who had money on the island, and then I followed his instructions to rob. After I got it, Jody drove me away and I took the money. 50-50 split with Jody. Sometimes he thinks we don't rob enough, so he would let us traffic people to make money for him. Miles recounted the entire deal between him and Jody. What? Marine actually cooperated with pirates. I thought that although Jody's fees were high, he was a good marine. It turns out that he was the one who called the pirates. No wonder people always go missing on the island. It turns out it's his fault. These marines are worse than pirates. The crowd of onlookers talked a lot, looked at Jody with disgust, and cursed one by one. Really, Colonel Jody? Karen stared at Jody, her flat tone filled with murderous intent. No, it's not true. Jody yelled. I'm a marine, how can I cooperate with pirates? This is slander and I don't admit it. Haha, it's okay. I have evidence. There are records of the transactions between Jody and I over the years. Miles looked ferocious, dismissing Jody's denial. You're looking for death. Jody raised the flintlock gun in his hand and suddenly pulled the trigger. With a swish sound, Karen appeared next to Jody, stepped on Jody under his feet, and said condescendingly. Advertisement. Do you still want to fight stubbornly? As he spoke, he exerted a little force, causing Jody to scream in pain. Ah, Jody, who had never suffered, had suffered this, and his hysterical voice spread throughout the bar. With a ferocious face, he shouted, You can't do this, you have no such right. Karen smiled contemptuously, and put more strength on his feet. I said, I follow the rules, if you don't obey, hit me. Take away. Jesse immediately put the shackles on Jody's wrists and lifted him up from the ground. With a flash of his eyes, Karen looked at Donahue, who was moving away from the crowd, and said calmly, My good brother, Mr. Donahue, where are you going? When Donahue heard this, his steps froze, and then he ran quickly. Karen bent down, raised Jody's flintlock, and pointed it at Donahue. Bang! The gunshot rang out, and scarlet blood overflowed from Donahue's chest. He clutched his chest and fell heavily to the ground before taking a few steps. Jesse gave Karen a thumbs up and said in admiration, I didn't expect the colonel's shooting skills to be so accurate. In fact, what I wanted to hit was his legs, why? He clearly used his knowledge. Karen's mouth twitched slightly, and he said calmly, Well, it's not bad, I also have a very powerful gunfighting technique. Quote. Just hearing the name sounds awesome. Jesse looked excited. The moment the bullet comes out of the barrel, you can make the bullet turn by shaking your wrist very quickly. Karen explained to Jesse seriously. After a pause, he reminded, But this kind of move is not for the strong, so don't do it easily. Try. Guion, who witnessed the whole process, asked suspiciously, is there really such a shooting technique? Why haven't I seen you use it before? This is a technique I heard on TV before, and it can still be fake. Karen said enigmatically. Of course, just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Jesse was convinced and secretly determined in his heart that he must master the art of gunfighting and prove to Major General Guion that what Colonel Cullen said was correct. Karen walked up to Donahue and said calmly, if I'm not mistaken, this is the information you provided to Jody. You run a tavern, so you must know a lot of information. Donahue fell on the ground, clutching Karen's trousers, and wailed. I was wrong. It was all forced by Jody. He found me and asked me to cooperate with him. If I didn't want to, he would kill me. I have lived here for more than 30 years. If I hadn't been forced by others, how could I have done something worse than a beast? Faced with Donahue's words, Karen didn't believe a word he said. He kicked Donahue aside forcefully and said calmly. Advertisement. If you have any questions, explain to them and see if they will forgive you for what you did. 5 or 6 strong men suddenly appeared in the crowd watching on the sidelines, surrounding Donahue, and each slap was rounded. After several consecutive blows, Donahue finally closed his eyes, his nose began to sob, and blood was mixed with it. Snot flowed out of my nose. MD, eat everything inside and outside. Lousy drinks here every day. Is that why you betrayed us? Shit, really shit, disgusting. Karen watched with interest for a while, then waved to Jesse. You watch here for a while, and then take him back to the warship. As for when it was almost time, it would depend on whether the crowd here was willing to let Donahue go. He asked Jesse to stay here not because he was afraid that the villagers would beat Donahue to death, but because he was afraid that they would not be able to do it and let Donahue escape. Take all the Marines here. If there is any resistance, kill them directly. After leaving such an order, Karen turned and left. When passing by Jody, he suddenly smiled at Karen and said, you will regret it. Karen stopped and said calmly, I regret that I came late. Jody lowered his voice. Do you know who is behind me? How dare you catch me? Oh, who is it? Let me hear it. Karen yawned and asked casually. Do you know the Don Quixote family? Jody looked around and said cautiously. Karen frowned slightly. Doflamingo. You know. Jody looked excited, but he was afraid that Karen didn't know. I have some understanding, so it's Doflamingo behind you. Karen was refreshed, but he didn't expect to catch a big fish. As a good friend of Rocinante, in order to prevent the tragedy of Rocinante, he had long had murderous intentions towards Doflamingo. Yes, Joker and I are close partners. You don't know, right? Joker is a celestial dragon. If you offend Joker, you have offended a celestial dragon. Don't say you are just a colonel. Even the major general around you would not dare to offend the Tianlong people. The sea area under my jurisdiction is the most important branch of the Don Quixote family. If you catch me, Joker will definitely not let you go. Jody stared at Karen, trying to see the fear on his face. Silence. After a long time, Karen laughed, and he smiled very happily. Ha ha ha, that would be great, I'm looking forward to it. Chapter 71 Doflamingo. Advertisement. Are you crazy? That's a Draco. Jody shouted in disbelief. When they heard the name of the celestial dragon, the bodies of the people around them couldn't help but tremble. They seemed to have seen the celestial dragon's arrival, and each one of them even breathed cautiously. There have been precedents of being persecuted by the celestial dragons for breathing too much. Even Guion couldn't help but frown. The development of things was somewhat beyond her expectation. The celestial dragons are descendants of 19 of the 20 kings who formed the world government 800 years ago. They claim to be descendants of the creator, and enjoy all privileges. The status of Tianlong people is supreme, this is the law of this sea. For the people of this world, the celestial dragons are gods, and once the gods are offended, they will face crazy revenge from the world government. Even General Marine has to give up all missions and do his best to protect the celestial dragons. Of course, for most people, they have rarely seen the celestial dragons, but that doesn't mean they don't know how terrifying the celestial dragons are. Jody was very satisfied with the reaction of the people around him, and he started laughing crazily, hysterically. Ha 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 ha. Do you know how scary the celestial dragons are? A small colonel can't catch me. Lousy is the celestial dragon's dog. It was time for him to feel extra proud when he said these words, and his trembling body gradually became calmer. Seeing that Karen didn't speak, Jody smiled even more wildly. Be wise and let Lousy go quickly. Lousy can also introduce him to the noble Tianlong people. Guion on the side patted Karen on the shoulder and said softly, Karen, why don't you let him go first and find some time? She made a wiping motion towards her neck, murderous intent flashing in her eyes. She didn't dare to offend the celestial dragons openly, but that didn't mean that she couldn't deal with the celestial dragons secretly, not to mention that she was just a celestial dragon man's dog. In her heart, Karen has a bright future, and she cannot afford to ruin her future for a piece of trash. Guion's movements of wiping his throat were not secretive, and his voice was not quiet. At least Jody saw it, which made Jody, who was laughing freely, feel like there was a lump in his throat and he couldn't laugh out loud. She stared hard at Karen's eyes, trying to see his heart through Karen's eyes, but she couldn't see clearly, not just now, she couldn't see clearly many times. He was sometimes very funny, sometimes serious, sometimes evil, sometimes just. A big smile suddenly appeared on Karen's lips. He slowly walked towards Jody, stretched out his hand and patted the dust on his body. Guyon's expression was a little disappointed. Although this was her suggestion, when Karen really decided to let Jody go, she was still inevitably a little sad. Ha 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 ha. Those who understand current affairs are heroes. You did the right thing. Advertisement. Jody's laughter stopped suddenly, and a crisp slap landed on his cheek, causing his whole body to spin 360 degrees on the spot. This was because Karen had restrained her strength, otherwise with this slap, Jody would probably be left with only his head moving. Karen. Guion looked at this scene blankly, and she had no time to stop him. Is this your choice? Guion didn't know why she wanted to cry, so she smiled. Her smile was calm and not artificial at all. Snot mixed with blood flowed all over the floor, and Jody stood there in a daze. You know my relationship with the Tianlong people, and you still dare to hit me. It took a long time before he could hold back these words. I'll tell you the answer next. The cold voice reached Jody's ears, and Karen looked at Jody coldly. You will regret it. I swear, you will regret your recklessness today. Crack. Sea of shit. Crack. 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 Sorry, it didn't go smoothly. Karen said in a low voice. I noticed that you don't seem to be able to understand people. I said it, and I asked you questions. Before I speak, please shut up, okay? Jody nodded hurriedly, his eyes full of resentment, and he didn't dare to say another word. Crack. Okay. Karen had a gentle smile on her face. Good. That's right. Karen nodded with satisfaction and asked, how did you get in touch with Doflamingo? Advertisement. He took the initiative to contact me. Do you have his contact information? Do you know of any other contacts? I mean, the same ones as you, Marine. I don't know, I'm only responsible for my side. The surrounding atmosphere became very strange. The guests here neither dared to leave nor spoke. They could only stare at Karen and Jody, who were interrogating with their eyes wide open. The air was eerily quiet, with only the sound of Karen and Jody's questions and answers. After asking for about a minute, no useful information came out, and Karen gradually lost patience. I need to speak to Doflamingo. Karen gestured to reach out, and Jody quickly took out a small phone bug from his jacket pocket. Are you crazy? Do you want to talk to the Tianlong people? Guion lowered his voice and sounded very concerned. Don't worry, Doflamingo is Doflamingo, and celestial dragons are celestial dragons. I'm not that impulsive. Karen gave Guion a reassuring look. What's the meaning? You'll find out later. Jody's resurgence, although I don't know why Karen contacted Doflamingo, is undoubtedly a good thing for him. Bulu bulu bulu. Who? When the caller picked up the call, Jody shouted excitedly. Lord Joker, I am Jody, and I am your important partner in the East China Sea. Hey, it's you. I remember I smuggled a batch of new weapons to you not long ago, right? They were sold out so quickly. A gloomy voice came from the phone bug. Or, do you want to sell me that mermaid? His laugh was so distinctive that Karen instantly recognized his voice as Doflamingo. No, Master Joker, my cooperation with you has been exposed. Marine wants to capture me. I beg you to save me. After success, I promise to dedicate that mermaid to you. Karen took a peek at Delica and found that she was neither happy nor sad, and there was no wave in her eyes. It seemed that she had long been used to being coveted by all kinds of people. On the contrary, Rodrick next to her was holding his hands tightly, lowering his head and not knowing what he was thinking. Hey, you trash, you showed your flaws so quickly. Now that you've been arrested, you can go to jail in peace. Chapter 72 Resisting Arrest. Advertisement. What? Master Joker, I am your most loyal subordinate, you can't do this. Jody could not believe that the god in his heart had abandoned him. No, it was impossible. He was a celestial dragon, how could he abandon his servant so easily? I don't need such incompetent subordinates, so you'd better go to prison. Why? Impossible, impossible. Jody looked ferocious and held his head in pain. Nothing is impossible, because there is nothing a mouse can do to save another mouse. Karen crossed his arms. He had no intention of not letting Jody speak from the beginning, because he clearly understood that Doflamingo would not save Jody. Doflamingo is undoubtedly a very charismatic person in the plot, and he also loves his cadres very much, so he has many fans in the plot. But is Jody a cadre? No, he is at most an insignificant role to Doflamingo like Bellamy. What's more, the current Doflamingo is far from the black and white situation in the plot. A celestial dragon expelled by the celestial dragons, although he is also a celestial dragon, is not a true celestial dragon after all. He has no right to influence marine and world government. If he really had this right, Counselor Crane would not go to sea to arrest him. Therefore, Karen is not afraid of Doflamingo, and now is the best time to attack Don Quixote. If he waits until he becomes 7 warlords of the sea, it will be difficult to target him. Doflamingo is now in the development stage. He privately runs an illegal human auction house in North Blue, provides slaves to the Draco and wealthy nobles, and kidnaps creatures of various races. He is also engaged in arms business, drug dealing and other illegal affairs in the underground world. He used his identity as a former celestial dragon to gain a lot of convenience, making the Don Quixote family the overlord of the North Blue and having a high influence in the North Blue. I just don't know if Doflamingo has contacted Kaido now. Karen's voice fell into Doflamingo's ears without any disguise. Rat, who are you? Doflamingo's voice came from the phone bug. An ordinary marine. Karen said calmly. You are the marine who arrested Jody, what do you think? If you want to follow me, I guarantee you will make a lot of money in the East China Sea. Doflamingo said seductively. Advertisement. Whether it's beauty, wealth, or power, I can satisfy you. Why? Just because of your status as a former Draco. Karen crossed his arms and mocked. You are just a piece of garbage expelled by the Draco. If you could really do it, Jody would not end up like this. Karen made a point of emphasizing the eviction. The most important reason why he called Doflamingo was to reveal his identity. Let his collaborators understand that Doflamingo can protect no one but himself. Hey, that's interesting. You are so interesting. Tell me your name. Kukuro Karen. Karen grinned. If you want revenge, go ahead, if you can, scum. Doflamingo did not hide his anger. Very good, I will remember you. Gaba. After the phone was hung up, Karen looked at Jody calmly and said slowly. You see, this is the god in your eyes, just a piece of trash. He can't protect you at all. How about it? If you want revenge, tell us the information you know about the Don Quixote family. Jody opened his mouth to say something, but in the end he shook his head and said nothing. You still want to help him keep a secret. Because I still have family, and I don't really know the other secrets of the Don Quixote family. Really, that's a pity. In order to prevent Don Quixote from silencing you, I had no choice but to strike first. Karen looked at Jody expressionlessly, slowly raised the flintlock gun in his hand, and pressed the muzzle against the other man's forehead. No, you can't do this. Jody's eyes widened in horror, his body was shaking slightly, and his voice was filled with despair and anger. You have no right to do this, I want to go to a military court. Karen pointed the flintlock gun at his arm. After thinking about it, although he knew that it would not hurt him, he did not hesitate in the end. He grabbed a handful of his own hair, and a broken hair appeared in his palm. Jody's eyes flashed. Then, he showed a creepy smile and said softly. So, dear Mr. Jody, why are you resisting arrest? Jody's face instantly turned pale, his eyes widened, he couldn't believe what was happening in front of him, his lips trembled slightly, but he could not make any sound. Advertisement. After a gunshot, smoke filled the air. The muzzle of the flintlock gun in Karen's hand was smoking, and he threw the gun to Jesse who was standing aside. This gun is quite powerful. You don't have to do this. Guillaume frowned, looked at the lifeless Jody on the ground, and said, he won't survive. Karen stretched nonchalantly and said in a relaxed tone, you know, I don't like waiting. It's up to you. It's your merit anyway. If you don't want it, just don't want it. Guillaume turned around and left angrily, seeming to be very angry at Karen's behavior. Quite cute. Looking at Guillaume's leaving figure, Karen felt a warm feeling in his heart. He touched his nose and smiled. Obviously you care about me. Close the team. Yes, Colonel. ... Meanwhile on the other side. North Blue, Don Quixote family. Doflamingo is sitting in the main seat of the room, wearing burgundy sunglasses, leaning on the sofa with his arms stretched out, his whole body leaning back, and his legs folded together, showing an unabashed domineering attitude. Bime, so by the way, is it interesting, Cuculo Cullen? His fingers tapped rhythmically on the table a few times, and his voice was low and hoarse, with a hint of unquestionable majesty. Help me investigate a person. With our current intelligence network at Don Quixote, it should be easy. Torbal, who was wearing a pair of small sunglasses and with a runny nose, said excitedly. I said, who made the young master unhappy? A cold murderous intent flashed in Doflamingo's eyes. A marine, his name is Cuculo Cullen. Do I need to clean him out? Doflamingo grinned crazily, his laughter revealing an aura of madness and cruelty that made people's hair stand on end. That's not interesting. I want to kill all his family members, no, the people in the town where he lives. Chapter 73 Call with the Warring States period. Advertisement. The East China Sea, an unknown sea area. A warship is sailing at high speed on the sea. The distant sky and the sea merge into a line. The sun is shining and the waves are sparkling, which is really beautiful. Karen stood on the plywood on the second floor, with the sea breeze whistling and blowing against his face with a salty and wet breath. The sea breeze seemed like a naughty child, teasing people wantonly and blowing his hair into a mess. Downstairs on the first floor deck, Marine is busy in an orderly manner. They are dressed in neat uniforms, with tall and straight postures, and skilled and agile movements. Karen stood above them, watching all this. The Marines, shouts, commands, and the clash of tools intertwined to form a unique symphony. It's so exciting. He turned around, leaned on the railing beside him, and looked back to the room on the second floor. Two girls were sitting around a cradle, whispering, not knowing what they were talking about. One of them is naturally Gion, and the other turns out to be the mermaid Delica. Of course, she is walking on the road now, and her mermaid characteristics cannot be seen at all. Karen looked at Delica in distress, and his memory returned to the day after Jody was executed. This is what happened. Karen held the phone and described to the phone the scenes that happened when he came to Sundai Island. On the other side of the phone bug, a H symbol could be vaguely seen above Sengwo's head, and he said angrily. So you executed him in public. Do you know that if something like this happens, you should first escort him to the headquarters for investigation? Do you know how much impact this matter will have? If everyone is like you and executes the branch military academy at will if they think it is guilty, then how will other branch Marines view you? Karen quickly moved the phone bug in his hand away from him. He picked out his ears and said with a smile, this is not a random execution. He obviously wanted to resist orders. I had no choice but to accidentally kill him. Major General Gion can testify for me. If you don't believe me, just ask her. It was really dangerous at that time. When Warring States heard this, the anger on his face became even worse. I asked her, don't think I don't know, now that you two have a good relationship, you can wear a pair of pants. Karen took a peek at Gion who was standing in the distance. Seeing that she didn't hear her, he retorted to the other end of the phone. Slander. You are just slandering me. Huh, you kid, forget it, I will handle this matter, what else is there? Warring States took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. Anyway, he's already used to dealing with these things. Advertisement. Well, if you think about it carefully, it's true, but it's not a big deal. Karen said hesitantly. What's going on? Warring States suddenly had a bad premonition. Karen said nonchalantly. It's nothing, I just offended a celestial dragon. What? The flames of the Warring States period that had just been extinguished suddenly boiled up again, and the tone of his speech was much higher. Is this a small thing? Then tell me what is a big thing. He knew that the celestial dragons were not beings that could be easily offended. Offending them would mean that the entire marine could get into trouble. I haven't finished talking yet, it's the former Tianlong. Karen didn't expect Sengoku's reaction to be so big. It seems that for this sea, the celestial dragons are really a taboo, whether it's pirates or marines. Warring States vaguely had an answer in his mind. There were not many Tianlong people, and there were even fewer former Tianlong people. His heart slowed down slightly, and his tone was serious. Who is it? Don Quixote Doflamingo. Sure enough, it was him. Because of Rocinante, Sengoku was also very concerned about Doflamingo. Warring States was silent for a moment, and finally nodded. Yes, I understand. Haha, I just said, it's a small thing. Karen shrugged, his tone relaxed. You little b****************, I really shouldn't have agreed to let you go to sea in the first place. Warring States gritted his teeth and cursed. It took him a full minute to calm down, and his tone became much calmer. I know something about Doflamingo. You don't know how vengeful he is. If you offend him, he will definitely not let you go. Whatever, if he wants to come, just come. Even if he doesn't come, I will meet him personally when I have the chance. Karen responded lightly, not taking Doflamingo to heart at all. Now that Doflamingo is still entrenched in North Blue, Karen has a great chance of winning if he really takes action. Warring States' eyes narrowed slightly. Do you know something? He suspected that Karen already knew Rocinante's true identity. As expected of a wise general, he could infer all this just from his own words. Karen felt a chill in her heart and said nonchalantly, what do you know? You know Doflamingo, and you have a grudge against him, otherwise why would you want to go find him? Advertisement. Sengoku listened carefully to Karen's next answer. Of course, I am a very stingy person. If he offends me, I will naturally go to him to cause trouble. Karen did not deny it and said vaguely. After a moment of silence, Warring States didn't hear any obvious questions, and he said worriedly. If he treats your family. Warring States thought of Karen's situation and did not say the next words. How can I still have family? Karen's tone was neither happy nor sad, as if she was talking about something that had nothing to do with her. If I want to talk about family members, it would be Teacher Zephyr. Counting Lieutenant General Garp, there is also him. Karen suddenly imagined the scene of Doflamingo taking revenge on the people around him, and his tone instantly became brighter. Then let him go, I think Lieutenant General Garp will be happy to see him. As for why not Zephyr? Karen believes that unless Doflamingo is a fool, he will not offend Zephyr by offending anyone. Of course, he clearly understood that there was a fool who did this later, but now that he is here, he will not allow this to happen. Warring States thought about it carefully and found that Karen was really not afraid of Doflamingo's revenge. He shook his head helplessly. Okay, I will handle the above matters. As for yourself, be careful. Karen nodded and said seriously, I will. Gaba. The phone bug was hung up. Karen stretched and prepared to return to his warship and exercise for a while. At this moment, a marine soldier walked up to Karen cautiously and looked at Karen with eager and admiring eyes. Colonel, there is a man named Rodrick who wants to see you. Rodrick, isn't he planning to leave the East China Sea with Delica? Does he want to take my ship? Karen thought for a moment and said calmly to the marine soldier in front of him. Well, I understand, let him come over. Yes, Colonel. Chapter 74 Rodrick and Delica. Advertisement. After a while, Rodrick and Delica came to Karen with a worried look on their faces. Hello. Roderick's drunkenness had long since disappeared with Jodi's death. He wanted to reach out and shake Karen's hand, but then thought that the smell of alcohol on his body was really unpleasant, so he retracted his hand. Go back. Then he looked at Karen blankly. He was very grateful to the person who helped him, but he was a little reserved because of the marine uniform Karen was wearing. We meet again, Mr. Rodrick. With a smile on his face, Karen reached out and shook his hand gently, trying to relieve his tension. I'm very grateful to you, sir. Oh, no, Colonel. Roderick's voice trembled slightly, but I really don't know how to express my gratitude. Just like the guest at the bar said before, now I am so poor that I only have this piece of clothing left. If you don't mind, I'll take it. I'm very concerned. Karen resisted in his heart, his expression remained unchanged and his tone was gentle. You know, I'm a Marine, so I don't need your material thanks. Afraid that Rodrick would think he looked down on him, Karen continued. When something like this happens, it is our Marine's problem. Now that Jodi is dead, this is not only good for you. In fact, I get more benefits than you. Rodrick nodded, his mood gradually calmed down, and he praised. You are a Marine, I mean you are a really good Marine. Is this a compliment? Well, Marine can't do such a thing as directly executing Jodi. Karen smiled calmly. This is my duty. I believe that most Marines are righteous. There are very few Marines like Jodi. There will be a new colonel taking over this place tomorrow. If you find that he has failed in his duties, you are welcome to report it at any time. Forget it, I'm ready to leave here forever. Rodrick said this very easily, as if he was just talking about today's weather. He had stayed on this island for so long that he almost forgot the passage of time. Karen was not surprised at all. Rodrick had already told him that he was going to leave. He asked casually, "Where are you going?" Rodrick smiled, with a trace of confusion and expectation in his eyes. I don't know, maybe I will return to my hometown and continue to be a businessman, maybe I will wander around the world. I have always felt that the sea is like a mysterious goddess, which is both attractive and awe-inspiring. Karen did not expect that Rodrick, who had experienced the days of being captured by pirates, would still want to make a living in this sea. Maybe this is the charm of the sea, which is dangerous but full of charm. Good luck. Karen nodded solemnly to Rodrick. So are you saying goodbye to me today? Advertisement. Yes, Colonel. When talking about the purpose of coming here, Rodrick suddenly hesitated. He gritted his teeth and said unspeakably, "That's right, you said that if Jodi is really like what I described, count me in. Reporting is meritorious. You know, although the sea is full of charm, it is too dangerous. I don't want Delica to take risks with me. I want to ask you to send her to Fishman Island." Karen looked at Delica, who was aside. She hadn't said a word since she came here. Do you think so too? Karen asked. He knew that both mermaids and fishmen yearned for the sun, but there was no real sun on Fishman Island. Delica neither affirmed nor denied, her tone was confused. I don't know where else I can go except Fishman Island. Karen saw the sadness in Delica's tone, and he said seriously, the sea is very big. The ones belonging to the fishmen are very small. Delica said calmly. Karen looked at Delica blankly, but he didn't refute. As early as more than 70 years ago, although fish people and mermaids had the word human in their names, they belonged to the fish category, and humans around the world did not regard them as humans. It was not until the year 1322 of the Hainan calendar that the Ryugu kingdom of Fishman Island became a member of the world government, and it established friendly relations with humans and was accepted by humans. However, a large part of humans are still very discriminatory towards fishmen. This also leads to the fact that fishmen and mermaids are rarely seen in other places. Even if you are lucky enough to see them, most of them are slaves. The fish people are okay, especially the mermaid, a beautiful mermaid. The common man is not guilty, but he is guilty of carrying a jade, not to mention that they themselves are a symbol of wealth. If their true identities are discovered by humans, the consequences can be imagined. Karen thought about it for a while and felt that Delica's current situation was indeed very dangerous, and joining her own warship was her best choice. Okay, then you can stay on my boat first. When I get to the Sabayati Islands, I will send you back. Of course, if you don't want to go back, you can. If you pass by the place you want to stay, let me know at any time. Good. Delica responded softly. Advertisement. Thank you, Mr. Cullen. Rodrick was also very excited. He trusted Karen very much. Although he was reluctant to let go, he still had to let go in the end. This is what I should do. Karen said solemnly. After you leave, Miss Delica, I will be responsible. You don't need to worry. I don't know why, but this sentence feels weird when I say it. It has the demeanor of an ancient celebrity. So, Rodrick left, his back looking very desolate and firm. The sea breeze roared by, and the waves kept beating against the side of the ship, making crisp sounds. Karen stood quietly on the deck, looking into the distance with blurred eyes, immersed in his own thoughts. Suddenly, a burst of sweet music broke his meditation. He came back to his senses and listened carefully. The music flowed into his ears like a clear spring. The melody was light and soothing, as if a breeze was gently blowing across his face, making people feel extremely comfortable. Although Karen didn't know the name of the song, she could infer from the gentle melody and gentle rhythm that it should be a lullaby. At this moment, Karen finally understood why Luffy's first wish after going to sea was to find a musician. The power of music is indeed wonderful. It can touch people's deepest emotions and bring warmth and comfort to people. This power is not only limited to physical relaxation, but also a kind of spiritual nourishment, which can help people get rid of fatigue and stress and rejuvenate. I have to admit, Delica's singing voice is really beautiful. Her voice is as clear and moving as the sound of nature, especially when she sings this kind of soothing music. Every note is particularly delicate. Karen couldn't help but think of her childhood. When night fell, her mother would softly hum a lullaby to lull him to sleep. That warm atmosphere is still vivid in his mind, making him feel endless warmth and care. Maybe when he actually builds a warship, when he is stationed at a certain base, it would be good to let Delica join him. Karen chuckled. It seems quite difficult to kidnap a music master. Chapter 75 Big News. Advertisement. It sounds really nice, much better than someone else's singing. Guillaume glanced at Karen, indicating something. Hey, you can praise me as much as you want, but can you please stop stepping on me? Karen walked towards the two of them and said helplessly, besides, I can hear you. Guillaume rolled his eyes at Karen and muttered, what I said is the truth. Can Colonel Cullen also sing? Delica asked curiously. I know a little bit, but I can only say that it doesn't sound bad. It's still far from good. Karen touched her nose and continued. You don't need to call me Colonel, just call me Karen. Since he wants to lure Delica to him, he must first make her feel close to her by addressing her. Ha! Guillaume chuckled without meaning. She turned back to Delica and said, don't be polite here, no one will discriminate against you here. If anyone dares to do this, just tell me directly and I will help you teach him a lesson. Okay, thank you. Delica bowed to Karen and Guillaume. Karen looked helplessly at Guillaume, knowing that Delica was still wary of the two of them, but it was normal. After all, she had been persecuted by humans, and it was a good thing to be wary. Have you arranged a place for Delica? Guillaume asked suddenly. Karen nodded. It's been arranged. The accommodation we originally planned to arrange for you is right next door. Guillaume thought for a while and suggested. That's not bad, the distance is very close. Can you ask Delica to take care of Yuta? She likes your music very much. Karen understands what Guillaume means. On the one hand, Delica can indeed take care of Yuta, but on the other hand, she is afraid that Delica will not be able to integrate here. Giving her the meaning of being here will make her feel at ease. Maybe little Yuta will also become a musician in the future. Okay, I like your children very much too. Delica said with a smile, a gentle light shining in her eyes. Guillaume's cheeks were slightly red. No, she is not my and Karen's child. So, Guillaume told Delica about Yuta's experience. After hearing Yuta's experience, Delica looked at her more closely, because Yuta's experience was very similar to hers. He was almost treated as a slave, he also liked music, and he was also taken in by Karen. Ding dang dang. A series of rapid footsteps reached Karen's ears from outside the door. Advertisement. Dong dong dong. Come in. A soldier in marine uniform held a newspaper and ran quickly towards Karen, saying as he ran. Colonel, it's not good, it's not good. Karen frowned slightly and said calmly, what's the matter? Are you in a panic? This is today's newspaper. The soldier handed a newspaper to Karen's hands. As soon as Karen opened it, she was startled by the shocking title. Shocking the world. Marine is fearless of the celestial dragons and openly resists the world government. Just looking at the title is nothing. The key is that there is a photo of Karen holding a phone bug. In the photo, Karen's eyes are full of disdain and ridicule. Behind him are a group of Marines wearing white uniforms. What's going on? Karen's heart tightened and she quickly scanned the content under the title. After watching it for 3 minutes, Karen slowly exhaled. Although the title was shocking, the content recorded in it was quite true. It clearly explained Karen's identity and background, and the cause of this incident. Not only that, but Doflamingo's identity was also revealed. It even paid special attention to the fact that Doflamingo was expelled by the celestial dragons, and even described how powerless and pale his identity was in front of Karen. I made the headlines like this. Fortunately, the photos taken of me were quite handsome. I just didn't expect that the news in this world would explode like this. Isn't Morgans afraid of offending Doflamingo? Why did he post like this? After seeing the content clearly, the tension in Karen's heart dissipated a lot. However, I remember that no one was taking pictures at the time, otherwise I wouldn't have noticed it based on my knowledge. It seems that Morgans really has some abilities, otherwise he would not have become one of the emperors of the underground world. Karen recalled the information about Morgans in his mind. He was very mysterious. He usually showed himself in the form of an orc, in the form of bird fruit and albatross. No one had ever seen his true appearance. Sometimes he will exaggerate the facts based on his own subjective wishes or for Boruto's attention, or even make up news. Morgans claims to be a miser, but he will not accept black money to report things he does not want to report. He does not like others to control his reports. The content published in the newspaper must be decided by himself. In other words, although he has no professional ethics, he is very neutral. Advertisement. Thinking of this, Karen was no longer surprised by such a report. A big news exaggerated for the sake of making news is exactly his style. He is worthy of being a big shot in the press, and his actions are big news. What's the content? Guion reached out and took the newspaper from Karen's hand. With just one glance, she froze on the spot. Karen came back to his senses and said to the recruiter. Well, I understand, it doesn't matter, you can go down first. Yes, Colonel. It took about 3 minutes for Guion to come back to her senses, and she returned the newspaper in her hand to Karen without any disturbance. Karen was a little surprised. You don't seem to care very much. Guion nodded and said calmly. I have seen a lot of news like this before, but I didn't expect that someone I know would also become the protagonist. What do you mean? Karen asked confused. Guion sighed softly and explained. Although there are very few such news, it is not unheard of. News agencies sometimes do this and randomly publish some false news. However, this matter involves the Tianlong people, so you should be careful. A little. Karen frowned and asked. What will the world government do? Just ignore it. Guion rolled his eyes at Karen. How is that possible? You are too optimistic. You have a special status now. The Warring States period will definitely protect you. They will not directly erase you. They will most likely send CP agents to investigate you first. Karen's mind moved, and he thought of Rob Lucci in the CP organization. He should be only 11 years old at this time. In 2 years, he will be sent out by the world government to solve the pirate invasion of the kingdom. I don't think the world government would send him to investigate him. Now that's good, you've probably become a celebrity in this sea now. Guion looked at Karen teasingly, covered his mouth and chuckled. Karen was stunned for a moment, and then suddenly thought of his own system, and an uncontrollable joy surged in his heart. Isn't this exactly what he needs?